and tell us what's on your mind.
MB McAfee, 22277 County Road 20. None of you were at the bridge opening on Saturday, and so I'd like to invite you sometime to come by and look at the shelter. It's really a pretty amazing place, and the programs are going to go on there. Probably will set a model for nationwide efforts. It's really pretty amazing what that board, the current board of the bridge, I'm not on that board anymore, but what they've done. And your presence was noted that it wasn't, none of you were there, and I'm sorry that's the case, but I hope you go by and have a look at it and walk around and see what's going on. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anybody else care to address the commission?
Hi. Julia Anderson, 17886 Road 27.9. I think that what I wanted to address has already been addressed here in a couple meetings ago, but I wanted to follow up and find out what we needed to do, because it was John Torban came and spoke with you guys about a jake break
Oh, yeah, yeah.
on 184.
Mm-hmm.
And
By Skyline?
pardon me?
By Skyline?
Yes, yes, and earlier, all the way from where the grade starts to go down, and we go into Big Bend, and of course the trucks come up on that and go, "Roar," you know, and so there are hundreds of us that are living out there that are dealing with the noise. And then with the, I guess when I saw from the commissioner meeting minutes that you guys have approved heavy industrial business to be opened up just south of that. And it said in your minutes that the traffic was going to be increased and the truck traffic would be increased. So we're going to get more and more and more of it. So I know John spoke with you guys. I spoke with him about it, and he said he wasn't real clear about exactly what was going to be done next. And I know he's going to be leaving town. So I wanted to kind of pick up the ball and find out what we need to do. So I'm really here to find out what the next step is and what you guys need from me to proceed with this.
On the high impact permit or the?
No, I mean, I know that's a done deal, but I'm just mentioning that as an increase in the truck traffic that's going to be coming through there. And so the jake break law, regulation really needs to be put into place, I think.
Two different issues.
Yeah, I think
Two different issues. You're in two different areas. The high impact permit, if I have this correctly, was issued south of town, not anywhere close to Big Bend.
No, I think she's talking about Ironwood, which
Yeah.
is where the Old Pond roasted
Ironwood,
timber
thank you.
was.
Yeah, and I'm not
But they're still
contesting
two
that. I'm
different
just saying that that's going to increase the truck traffic. So the need for a jake break regulation would be further.
So
in-
I'm going to have to ask this question. Do you have a decimeter reading as far as
No.
the engine brake?
No.
Because really, for me to make a decision, I have to see what really is the sound, because most of those engine brakes have mufflers on them, and they're a safety requirement built by the manufacturer for the truck. So if they're exceeding the decimeter per our statute or per our land use code, then there's something that we can maybe do. If they're not out of compliance, it's hard for me just to.
Well, there's no sign there that says no jake brakes allowed. So that would be the first, isn't that just the first step?
There's nothing restricted on, that would be a county road T? Or
No, I
No,
think
it's
she's
Highway
talking about
184.
184.
That's a
the
state highway.
Correct, it's a
State
state
highway.
highway, and we have no jurisdiction.
And that's what
over
John
that.
mentioned. So that's what I'm trying to find out. What's the next step? What do you guys do? What do we do? What do we need to do?
To talk to CDOT, because that's where we have to go,
Right.
is we have to have some kind of proof to take to them to say, we're exceeding this, and then that count of how many are
How
exceeding
many
it.
vehicles are there?
So John mentioned that you guys had said that you as the board would go to the state. So is that the,
We have.
If you
we
bring
meet
a
with the
decimeter
so
reading.
you need the decimeter
We
reading
meet
from
with the
us?
state.
Okay, so what are the procedures on that?
You can find decimeters, you can rent them. I mean, they're really,
Okay, so it
You
doesn't
just
have to
have
be,
to
it doesn't have to be regulated, I mean.
it would have to
could
be a
mild reading.
certified, it would have to be a certified
accurate
meter.
instrument, Right.
Okay,
And
Otherwise-
from your property line, it needs to be measured from your property line.
So if others are, do we do this along other places as
I would-
well? The
I
more
would
people,
do
the better?
that too.
Okay.
Can
And then
take
do
as
we
many
come back
as-
to you with these, in
Sure.
this venue with those readings?
And then we can then go to CDOT task, because it's really not it's in our county, but the state highway, that right of
I
way is the
understand that.
jurisdiction of the state.
Yeah, I understand that. Okay, so and I figured there was more that we needed to do, but I needed to find out what it was. So decimeter reading, come back to this meeting and present that to you?
Correct, otherwise we don't have anything saying that they are compliant or non-compliant.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you. Anybody else?
Ellen Foster, County Road T, Dolores. I'd just like to ask for an update to see if the toxicology report for the Kinder Morgan CX-14 well has been received yet,
Not yet.
and also if Kinder Morgan has met with the neighbors on the GP 28 and 30 wells.
Is that the subdivision that lies in proximity to that?
Don Haley would be able to answer that. I can
Yeah.
grab him.
Why don't you see if Don's got an answer to that? I know they had it scheduled, they were getting it scheduled, but
It was in November, I think.
He's nodding his head, no.
Oh, there's Don.
Oh,
No, they haven't
Not
met
yet?
with him yet?
No,
Don?
they received an email and they're responding to the email and they're still trying to coordinate that meeting. They've had some conversations.
They had a proposed start date of November 1st, and also the road department, as I understand it, is asked that no new well pads be constructed between, I think it was December 1st and...
That depends on the
I think
winter.
it depends on the road conditions. I
Mm,
think it depends on what
Depends
kind
on
of
the-
moisture in the road conditions, whether it would be
mhm.
destructive to the roads or not.
And they are coming before BOCC, maybe November 5th is what Don is saying. So I don't know when they're planning on getting started, but they haven't come before the BOCC yet for those.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Good morning, gentlemen. Tom Seymour from County Road S.6. I want to thank the county commissioners and all the conservatives and independents and libertarians and any Republicans still left for the wonderful support that we got for the Lincoln Day dinner and all of your abilities to help that fundraiser grow. We had 195 people attend the dinner, and our speaker was Michelle Malcolm. She did a wonderful job. The food was fantastic, and I just want to say that I wish I would have known that the bridge was having their open house, because it was not advertised very well, and the cars that have been parked out there for the last 2 weeks made it look like it was just a regular day when I drove by there. It didn't look like an open house to me. So I apologize, MB, for not being there. I apologize, MB, for not being there, but there's many of us that never even heard about it. So, but thank you, gentlemen, for your support.
Anybody else? Okay, we'll close the public comment session. And now we have Ed Millard, Don Schwint, and
you,
Frank Krugel. Excuse me.
Did you want to move that ahead?
Oh, yes, we have, before we call them
Oh.
up, they just need some
Yeah,
signatures
excuse
for a
us just
grant
a moment.
application.
Yeah, Larry and
2 minutes. Cindy?
Cindy, there we go.
Yes, me.
Please come up to the table and
Hi.
Good morning.
Hi.
good morning.
Morning.
Thanks for the opportunity of letting me work on this for you guys, because I didn't know anything at all about charging stations until this, so thank you.
for helping us.
I love it when I learn stuff.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Do you have any questions?
I do not.
Okay.
Is there anything you wanted to change on it? Did you get a chance to read it over or nothing like that?
No, I don't think there's anything that you need to change on it right
Right.
now. you know, here again, it's just a request.
Yeah, it's
Well-
And we'll see where we end up in the request
Yeah.
process.
You know, if hey, is it easy to change stuff? When I reviewed it, I just thought I saw a couple typos. I'm gonna try to open it up to see if I put notes on it. And I don't think there was anything significant. I wasn't gonna say
Okay.
anything.
I had 2
This-
proofreaders, or 3, so.
Well, I can't spell worth a darn, so.
Does it describe the location?
Yes.
Yeah, there's, one of the attachments that we're sending in has a picture of that location we're talking about,
Correct.
where the trailer that we'll attach with it.
And is that location where you was?
Yeah, where that,
you
the old
thought-
trailer was.
Okay.
Yeah,
I have that. It's just an over,
yeah, just a
Shot of
Google
the-
shot.
mhm. And I have it all marked.
What is the amount?
9,000, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, the grant's 9,000.
Correct.
Five.
$9,000. So I didn't, in between pages 8 and 9, there's this number 2. I didn't really understand what you were saying there. Another item under consideration in the county is if another unit is needed, a solar unit reduce the environmental impact. Does that
Okay.
sentence make sense? It didn't,
Where are you at on that?
Page 9.
the very
first
top
paragraph.
of
Oh, 2.
page 9.
Yes, I see it in the end of the second paragraph.
So to me,
Under
that
the
just
question.
didn't make sense, but if it makes sense to you, I guess that's fine.
It did, that was one of the corrections that Heather Alvarez from Mancos, I had her be my second take for this area, for that particular unit. So, you know, what they wanted to know was to be environmentally sound. Would we use electricity to make electricity, to sell electricity? Or would we have an option or a thought to have solar so that we're not increasing the use of electricity, we're using the sun? So she just thought it was good to have that in there.
And we are working on that option.
Yes.
That was one of our first options for one of the first solar arrays. We're just working through transformers, transformer issues right now.
Yeah.
Because of 75, well, anyway, transformer issues.
So
Yeah, we've got some things that we have to work out with Empire Electric on transformer capacity at the fairgrounds
Before we can,
everything completely fulfill our solar project.
Just the last sentence of that paragraph.
Okay, I'll just add the letter, let's see. Yes. Another item under consideration in the county is if another unit is needed, a solar
Solar unit to reduce.
unit, oh, 2.
To reduce,
Oh, gotcha.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Just needs a 2
I
in
can
there, yeah.
easily change that.
Okay.
And it won't change the setup if you sign this today.
okay.
Gotcha.
Then I can just add that in there. That is easy.
There was another little thing on, let me see where that is. On page 12, number 19, just there is no plan or there are no plans, just to make it. I would just get rid of the S on plan. It's probably the easiest thing to do.
Okay, perfect.
Mhm.
You're a good proofreader. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And then I have all your signed documents that you did for last week that are required. The
Okay.
W-9, your letter of why you need this and your support. And a couple of maps of the scenic byway, a few attractions, all the different things that are down here. And I did talk to, because I worked at Mesa Verde, I had connections up there. Perhaps the lady that does the website is thinking if this does go through, that they might like to put that on there as information for fuel, because that place is negligent of fuel stations that are close to Mesa Verde. So they were thinking about that. So I haven't heard anything. It's just a request that I made.
There's also an app out there that
Yeah.
every charging station that goes
Yes.
in anywhere shows up
Goes
on
on
the
the
app.
I saw that. That was great.
It's amazing. I tell you, I looked at that and I couldn't believe how many there are. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
they're going all over the place, so yeah, that'll just be an additional.
Just extra information for our visitation.
Yep.
Yeah, you can put in a start point and a stop point, and it'll pop up every charging station along the road. Yeah.
I would entertain a
So
motion.
I would move that we sign and accept the grant application form for the Charge Ahead Colorado for the EV charging station.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the Charge Ahead Colorado grant application for an EV charging station at the Montezuma County Fairgrounds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All right.
Can
Thank
Ed
you.
Millard plug his swather in?
What's that,
If
sir?
he had an electric swather?
That's still down the road, I think. I think that's still down the road. Although they're electric Harley Davidsons out there now.
Yeah, I read about
Yeah, they've got fast going electric motorcycles.
Thank you very much, Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you for helping with the grant. We appreciate it.
You're a good proofreader. Next time I'm sending it to you.
Call him. Yeah. Don't call Saul. Call John.
Have a wonderful day, guys.
All right. Thank you. Okay, now then, Mr. Millard, Mr. Schwent, and Mr. Kugel. Appreciate you gentlemen coming in this morning to give us a briefing on what the water in Colorado is, where we're headed, where we've been, where we're headed, and what we got right now. So thank you, Ed. Thanks for all the work that you've done, all your research and compiling and your excellent PowerPoint presentation. You've done a fantastic job, and I think you're going to wake up. I think you've awoken the giant in Colorado. I do believe.
Worries me.
Well, I think he needed to be awoken. So I truly appreciate what you've done here. So, go right ahead.
Let's introduce our
Yeah.
guest.
Mr. Frank Kugel, is that pronounced right?
Yes.
He's the new director of Southwest Water Conservation District. He replaced Mr. Whitehead. Don Schwent, member of the board of Dolores Water Conservation District, and Don, tell them the rest of them. You're in so many different places. I can't name them all.
You've put me on the Southwestern Water Conservation District Board. I'm on the Colorado Water Congress Board. Here again, helped by Southwestern, and long-standing board member of Family Farm Alliance, a Westwide organization. So those are the current boards that I'm active engaged in with water.
And been deeply involved in Montezuma County water issues for 30, 40 years?
I put it since I was a kid. 30 years old, or that's still a kid.
Yeah.
In my college days, I didn't think it was, but that was 10 years later.
Guess what? It was, wasn't it?
Still consider myself a kid.
Yeah. And Ed Miller.
Good morning, gentlemen. I represent you guys on the Southwest Roundtable, and as of July, I represent Southwest Colorado and the Southwest Roundtable on the Interbasin Compact Committee, which is the state-level version of the Roundtable. I'm here today partially because we have a periodic update that Don and I do, and we wanted you to meet Frank, but I also am going to be doing a presentation at Colorado Mesa University November 13th at their 9th Annual Water Forum. And I needed to make sure that you knew I was doing this and give you a brief preview of what I'm going to be doing. I'm not going to give you the whole presentation today, but I wanted to make sure that you knew what I was doing. It's going to be talking about the forgotten law of the river, the Colorado River, and the path forward to the difficulties we're facing today. I'm going to be on that panel with Russell George, who is the legislator that founded the roundtables and the IBCC. And the moderator is going to be Luke Gingrich from JUB Engineering in Grand Valley, which you met when he was down here at Destination Grow. This presentation, and we're still working on how it's going to work, but I've got 3 parts to it. Forgotten Law of the River is historical and explains, there's an old saying about a road paved with good intentions, and you know where that one ended. That's about where we are today, so you need to know how we got here. Before they start drying up our farms and turning them to dust with demand management or buy and dry, it's really important that we all know and all the water rights holders know how we got here. And we need to start looking for solutions that are better than doing that to our county, because ag's important to us, it's important to rural counties. So this part of the presentation is, they never told us really how we got here. They kind of glossed over structural deficits and what happened in the lower basin. And Don and I think it's really important that everybody that's a water right holder that wants to know knows what the story is. So that's the reasoning behind this. The second part, as Larry Don, last time I was here, he kind of conveyed to me I need to stop talking about the history and finding a path forward and start talking about solutions. So that's what the second part of the presentation will be. I'm not sure I'm going to do it at CMU, but I am working on it. And it has two parts. One is to talk about the 2026 renegotiations of the interim guidelines, because that has a lot of impact on how the river's operated, and it could have a lot of influence on the Dolores project and all of the reservoirs in southwest Colorado, how those negotiations come out. And then the second one is talking about path forward for augmenting the river by means other than demand management. And I wanted to tell you that based on a presentation I did at the roundtable last week, Steve Harris put together a motion, and he asked that our roundtable go to the state and ask them to start focusing on phreatophyte removal, which the county is already working on. Weather modification, cloud seeding. It's kind of hard to predict whether it's working or not, but it's an important way to augment the river. And it's in the DCP, and both of those are in the DCP, but they've been forgotten because everybody's been talking about demand management and drying up our farms. So he wanted to get them back on at least equal footing with demand management. And then the third one he wants to add is, which is not in the DCP, is better forest management. By thinning forests and cutting down timber that's overgrown and burning out brush, it's a great way to put water back in our river without drying up our farms. So that passed unanimously, and it'll be forwarded on to the state. So.
Good.
And
Good
again,
stuff.
I've got 3 parts to this, and if you guys want to hear particular parts of it, you want to interrupt me, I don't have to do this in sequence, and I'd prefer just having a conversation here, and I want to get these 2 guys involved before I use all their time. So I'm going to go through a little bit of it, but if it gets a little bit more than you want, we can stop and just have a conversation. So.
Okay.
And
Proceed.
Next slide. I'm going to be talking about, in this presentation, I'm going to be talking about the 1922 Compact and the 1984 Upper Basin Compact. Have you got the whole, part of this is clipped. Is there a video problem?
I don't know if where should the video be embedded? I don't.
Yeah, the right side. We'll press ahead. This is basically, let's move on to the next slide. I'm going to have to move kind of quickly today. First off, I'm going to talk briefly about a section of the 1922 Colorado Compact. It's where all this began. Delph Carpenter basically used the Compact Clause to try to divide up the Colorado River before Arizona and California grabbed it all, so that we'd have some water for us as we develop somewhat slower than the lower basin. A key part of this is in Article 1. The major purposes of this compact are to provide for equitable division and apportionment of the use of the waters of the Colorado River system. Article 2 defines the Colorado River system, that portion of the Colorado River and its tributaries within the United States of America. And it's really important to notice the term Colorado River system. Next page. Article 3, it divided up the Colorado River system and apportioned from the Colorado River system in perpetuity to the upper and lower basin, respectively, the exclusive beneficial consumptive use of 7.5 million acre feet of water per annum, which shall include all the water necessary for supply, blah, blah. And it also allocated 1 more million acre feet to the lower basin to cover tributaries. The key point here, and you asked me last time, the key point here is the compact was originally designed to include the lower basin tributaries in the compact and divide them. That's what that language says. It says they're part of the lower tributaries. The Gila River, the Virgin, and the Muddy are just as much a part of the compact as the Gunnison and the Green River.
And the salt also.
Salt's a tributary to the Gila. Let's go on to the next slide. Unfortunately, Arizona did not like the fact that their tributaries were included in the compact, so they refused to sign the compact. In 1928, when they went to Congress, the lower basin went to Congress to authorize the Boulder Canyon Dam, which is now Hoover Dam. Congress intervened in the compact, and they wrote legislation with these terms in it. The important ones are number 3, the state of Arizona shall have the exclusive beneficial consumptive use of the Gila River and its tributaries. The waters of the Gila River and its tributaries should never be subject to the diminution whatever to any allowance which may be made by treaty or otherwise to the United States of Mexico. And then they went on to say that all of the provisions of said tri-state agreement shall be subject to all provisions of the Colorado River Compact. Basically what Congress did is they rewrote the compact here, and they gave the Gila River and all its tributaries to Arizona. And then in number 6, they said they weren't changing the compact, even though they just did. And the ironic thing here is Arizona got everything they could possibly want at this point, and they still refused to sign the compact. Let's go to the next slide. Next slide. This is a map drawn up by the Audubon Society. They're really good at mapping where all the ag water is because they want to put it back in the rivers. The Gila River is that really big tributary that runs right south of Phoenix there, and the Gila. It's a big river. The estimates, they don't really want anybody to know how much water it yields at this point, but estimates that I've seen are probably 2.25 million acre feet. It's a wasting river, so the bottom section wastes 1 million acre feet, so it's a good thing that they're using the entire river up by Phoenix and the Salt River Project and the Coolidge Dam at the San Carlos Reservoir. But when they took this river out, they unbalanced the compact. They basically should have had that full 2.25 million coming out of their apportionment, but they wanted their full compact apportionment, and they wanted all of the tributaries too. The Virgin and the Muddy is the other river at issue here. Basically, Utah and Nevada has been dividing it up. It's maybe 300,000, and the Little Colorado is the other, maybe 300,000 acre feet. But basically, the bottom line is this is the first step to unbalancing the Colorado River, and it occurred in Congress in 1928. Next slide. These are basically a brief summary from 1946 of the yields of the various rivers. Again, Little Colorado, maybe this is probably higher than you would see today. The hydrology was better back then. 300,000 Little Colorado, 300,000 Virgin. And it's got some natural river estimates for what crossed the international boundary of Mexico if there were no diversions out of it. Next slide. These are, this is the breakdown of all of the claims that have been made on the Virgin River. Basically what's been happening in the lower basin is the tributaries were removed from the compact, so it's free water to Nevada, Utah, Colorado, and Arizona. So they've been making huge claims on it, and that's where they're getting all the extra water that they're not allowed under the terms of the compact. They're taking them out of the tributaries. When they take them out of the tributaries, the Colorado has less water in it. The other thing that you'll notice in the lower basin is they've never made any allowances for evaporation loss in Lake Mead, carries losses in all of the rivers, et cetera. So, next slide. This is how the compact was supposed to be divided in 1922. It was 7.5 million for the upper basin on the left, 7.5 million for the lower basin on the right, and Mexico got 1.5 million acre feet. And then there's an extra 1 million that was supposed to cover the Gila for Arizona. Next slide. This is how the Colorado River is actually divided today. That lower tributaries is probably more like 2.5 million acre feet. It varies with each year based on the weather. And in addition to that, so they expanded that slice from 1 million to 1.5 million acre feet. And you have to allow for all of the evaporation losses in all of those huge reservoirs that have been built since 1922. So there's a 500,000 that the upper basin has to provide for Lake Powell. There's another 500,000 for the Crisp reservoirs. There's a 500,000 for Lake Mead, and it's more when they're full, which they're not right now. So there was never any allowance made for that 1.5 million acre feet. And there's carriage loss all the way up and down the river. So you'll notice that the upper basin has been slowly whittled away so that we're down to 4.5 million acre feet instead of 7 million acre feet, 7.5 million acre feet. The other irony is we're paying evaporation losses on Lake Powell and Crisp. That's not really our water. It's water being stored for the lower basin. So basically, the lower basin's been taking water. We've been slowly giving it away. And the rest of this story is explain how we've been giving it away. So let's try to move quickly. And like I said, if you want to interrupt me and move on to some conversation, we should do that. This is kind of a brief breakdown of how Arizona uses their water. This was from Tom Bushotsky earlier this year at Getchis Wilkinson. He basically did a percentage breakdown, and you can figure out from what the Colorado River entitlement is, how much they're using. 21% of their water is coming from the in-state tributaries. 6%. It's between 2.5 and 2.8 million, depending. It's coming from the Colorado Compact and Central Arizona Project. And if you add all this, oh, and the other key part is they're still taking 40% of their water out of groundwater. It's not sustainable. That state is in a world of hurt someday unless they get a lot of water. So they've been fighting tooth and nail for the last 100 years to get every drop of water they can. The other thing is they've built a huge, vibrant agriculture economy, and they obviously have huge cities dependent on it. So they're serious about protecting their water, and unfortunately, Colorado's not so serious. Next, we can skip over this one. Okay, the next rung of when we started losing our water was in 1944. The compact, that part I just skipped over, does give Mexico 1.5 million acre feet. It's kind of out of comedy. It's kind of it's not a hard commitment, and it's not a priority one call on the river. But in 1943, 1944, during World War II, Mexico was starting to place claims on the Rio Grande River, and Texas was taking exception to it. So John Conley, during World War II, water uses in Mexico and the United States for both the Colorado and the Rio Grande rivers gradually increased. It's no secret that Senator Conley of Texas was the chief proponent of a new treaty relating to these rivers. A deal was made by which the Mexican government gave up a big part of its claim on the Rio Grande in exchange for doubling Mexico's supply on the Colorado River. They were basically taking 750,000 at that time, and it was up to 1.5 million. The other key part is that turned into a priority one call on the river, and it's an international treaty, so it can't be broken. So at that point, Mexico was moved ahead of both the lower basin and the upper basin, and they were given a guarantee of 1.5 million acre feet at the border, which means that the upper basin states absorb all of the carriage loss to get it to the border. So it's not 1.5 million, it's probably more like 1.8 million or 1.9 million.
And Senator Connolly did that because he was trying to protect Texas.
Sure.
Exactly. He was a New Deal Democrat, FDR New Deal Democrat. Let's go on to the next slide. It talks a little bit more about what happened here. There were numerous opposition witnesses at the Senate hearings to ratify the treaty. They came from California in particular, but I'm sure the upper basin was where they basically said, if you do this, there's going to be a shortage on the river. They knew at this point in time they didn't have the surpluses they thought they did in 1922. And this says the United States, having undertaken this as a national obligation, should not require the farmers, the water users, and the cities of the Colorado River Basin to make good on this. Basically, what Mo Udall is saying here is that this is a national obligation to meet this 1.5 million acre foot obligation. Instead, it's coming off of the upper basin right now because we have to provide half of the Mexico obligation as part of our compact obligations out of Lake Powell. So instead of delivering 7.5 million acre feet on a 10-year moving average, we have to deliver 8.23 million acre feet. The other key point is that since all of the tributaries in the lower basin have been used, the lower basin doesn't really have any water to provide Mexico, so it all has to come from us. Next slide. Don wanted me to put this in there. It's a little bit complicated, but one of the solutions is they put a desalting plant in Yuma, and they were going to desalt all the runoff from the Gila River project and then send that water to Mexico to try and start resolving 90,000 acre feet of this obligation. They would basically clean the water up and then put it in the river, and it was wastewater being recycled. Unfortunately, since that plant's been built, it's run maybe 3 times, and it's been broken most of the last 20 or 30 or 40 years, and they need more money to fix it. So this is one of the many places where they've had these good intentions to solve this problem, but it went bad on them.
The reason I think it's important, they're getting water. Lots of people don't even know that.
It's salty water.
They don't get it and use it, but it's environmentally used, which is a big player in where we go. And so that's one of the complicated pieces of this puzzle that we all need to be aware of.
In Mexico, if they wanted, they could put a desalt plant in Mexico.
There you go.
Well, they've got an international treaty that says we have to give them 1.5 million acre feet no matter what, and then international treaties, unfortunately, trump.
But does the treaty say that it has to be salt-free?
Probably.
Salinity law, I think, followed up on that with the treaty, so we have got a U.S. law that says it needs to be to a level. That's what drove the whole salinity program, of which
Yeah, exactly. That's
we
what,
know a lot about here locally.
Yeah.
that's why they're taking salt out up here, because we can't deliver water to Mexico. It's too salty for them to farm with, so.
It's Imperial Dam is the measurement. I'm pretty sure I'm right.
I think this bypasses Imperial Dam. It's going through the.
Yep.
It's kind of forgotten water. Everything in the lower. The cool thing about the lease ferry obligation is it's unforgiving for us because we have to put X amount of water through there no matter what. But when you get into lower basin, there's just all kinds of wiggle room down there, and they've been using every bit of it. So it's kind of the story of the Colorado River. Okay, let's keep moving. So then the next step, Arizona started litigating this in the 30s, I think it was, probably right after the compact was signed. They started the longest Supreme Court and most complicated Supreme Court case in history in the 30s. It was finally resolved in 1964, 63 and 64. California wanted the Upper Basin, Wyoming, and Colorado to be part of this lawsuit, but unfortunately it was only supposed to solve lower basin issues, so the Supreme Court wouldn't allow Colorado and Wyoming into it. They were only resolving apportionments between the lower basin states. They include Utah and New Mexico because they have parts of their territory in the lower basin. Unfortunately, the decision that they made dramatically affected Colorado and Wyoming, so they didn't do what they said they were going to do. They solved this problem by basically taking the Upper Basin's unused compact entitlement.
Sure.
But unfortunately, we didn't even have a chance to represent ourselves in this case. So 1964, Arizona was desperately trying to get authorization to build the Central Arizona project so that they could use the rest of their compact entitlement. They were only using it down by Yuma, and so they had to get these issues resolved on how much water they were, so it had to be resolved by the Supreme Court. This paper, Arizona v. California, by Larry McDonald, I've talked to him. He works at Getchis Wilkinson in Boulder now. He was at University of Wyoming when he wrote this. It's a great paper to introduce you to this pivotal part of the Colorado River. And I've talked to him, and he looks at this from an upper basin perspective, whereas most of the papers on this look at it from a lower basin perspective. He says Arizona v. California fostered unsustainable increases in consumption of basin water and created uncertainties in the meaning of the 1922 compact that are now at issue. Under traditional principles of equitable apportionment law and development, Arizona was basically losing this case under their first argument, which was based on prior apportionment and prior appropriation and equitable apportionment, which is the standard water law. But unfortunately, CAP hadn't been built yet, so they weren't using the water. So their defense, what they turned to was, they turned to the 1928 Boulder Canyon Project Act. It was federal law, and it basically gave them the Gila and the Salt River. So they basically turned to that messed up congressional action, and they said that Congress has changed the compact, and that's the Supreme Court sided with them. This is kind of an important thing because at this point, the Colorado Compact isn't sacred anymore. Congress has intervened and the Supreme Court has intervened, and it's been rewritten multiple times. So when people tell you that governs the law of the river, it doesn't really anymore. The federal government has intervened in it multiple times, and the Mexico Treaty again is the other one. So, and he says Arizona's uncompromising resistance ultimately yielded significant benefits. Everybody says we shouldn't litigate any of this. Litigation is bad. Arizona's litigated for 100 years and they won.
They've won a bunch, haven't they? They've won a bunch.
Okay, next slide. So it's kind of hard to read this with part of this is clipped. I should have checked the video. I gotta maybe squinch this up a little bit. Okay, so he kind of summarizes the major issues we have here. And this is the upper basin position per him. They don't articulate it much, but the lower basin has theirs, and it's basically the opposite of this one. The Gila and all the lower basin tributaries are part of the Colorado River Basin. Its water supply should be subject to the provisions of the 1922 compact, which would unfortunately mean that Arizona doesn't have enough water to run CAP. They don't have as much water as they're getting now. Its uses must be considered both in determining how much water the lower basin is consuming and in deciding who bears the responsibility for meeting the Mexico delivery obligation. If they don't have any tributaries, they don't have any water to send to Mexico unless they take it out of their compact obligations, entitlements. And he goes on to say this is very possible. This will need to be decided in the U.S. Supreme Court, and that really makes Colorado nervous because they don't like to say that. Don and I think they probably should at least keep it on the table.
And to me, that slide, in terms of what the upper basin position is critical for us from our level. to keep hammering home. That's what we believe, plain and simple.
Yeah.
We don't get to be at the table.
I should note that I've talked to Becky Mitchell about this, and I wanted to make sure she didn't have concerns about me. She's our UCRC commissioner now. She replaced James Eklund a few months ago. I did talk to her when she was down at Fort Lewis. She's supportive of me doing this. She tells me to be careful. She is going to be presenting at this, and she is interested to hear what I have to say. So it's kind of a good thing that at least she talks to me, and I can communicate some of this stuff to her. She's reading the stuff I send her, and she is our UCRC commissioner, so she is our seat at the table now. And that's way better than the relationship I had with James Eklund. You know the stories of how my relationship with James Eklund, so he's gone now, and that's a good thing as well. So I am doing my best to get up there and get the ears of people. I know you guys want me to do something about it instead of just sit down here and talk about it, so I am trying to get up there and do it. Me getting on the IBCC was key to that.
Yeah.
And I want to express my appreciation to all the people on the round table, some of who are sitting at this table, and Bruce Whitehead that helped me get that seat, because it gives me a seat at the state. So July, I was sitting in a seat with our Attorney General, Phil Weiser, and Dan Gibbs, our DNR Commissioner, and CWCB. They may not have appreciated everything I said there, but at least they're hearing me, so. Okay, next slide.
Somebody needs to wake them up.
True.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's Don and my job, so, and Frank's now. And Bob.
Yeah, we've got 4 gentlemen here this morning that's their job.
Don't forget Ken.
And Ken now.
Yes, and Ken Curtis, absolutely.
Since the last time we were here, we should note that Mike Preston has started his retirement, and Ken Curtis is the general manager for the Dolores Water Conservation District, and I think that's a great thing, because he's got a good head on his shoulders, he's got an engineering background, and
yeah.
And he's another person I can communicate well. You all know Mike and I had some issues, so it's kind of a good thing to have a friendlier face at DWCD. So yeah, I think you all agree with that. So.
Yeah, I think Ken was a great appointment to that position, and I think he'll serve us well.
I appreciated Mike's management ability. He did a great job, but he just wasn't as ag-centric as we need in this area. Yeah. So the UCRC in 1965 was in a state of shock because the Supreme Court had just ruled on lower basin apportionments, and they basically took the upper basin's water to fix it, and we didn't get to have a seat at the table. So they hired a guy named Royce Tipton. He was a professional engineer, water engineer for Denver Water at the time, to write a report. It's another good read, at least the first part of it is. He said any increase in the use on the lower river must be made from water apportioned to the upper basin, but now unused by it. Actually, the aggregate demand on the Lake Mead is close to 9 million acre-feet per year. It is apparent that present uses of the lower river are dependent upon significant amounts of water from Lake Powell in excess of those required by the Colorado River Compact. He's basically saying we have to release 9 million acre-feet from Lake Powell at least, or the lower basin will have problems. As long as we have surpluses like we did in the 80s and 90s, that's fine. But when we hit 2000, we don't have surpluses anymore. And this is kind of prescient because if you know how much water we've been releasing from Lake Powell for the last 5 years, it's 9 million acre-feet because that's what they asked for in the 2007 interim guidelines. We were supposed to be releasing less than 8.23 sometimes and more than 8.2.3 sometimes, but it's all gone in their favor, unfortunately. There's a long explanation of why that is, and Eric Kuhn and Brad Udall have started to surface it out. But the bottom line is that they're taking our water to supply Mexico, Central Arizona project, and all of the compact entitlements, and all of the evaporation and carriage losses.
And then asking us to do demand management so we can send more.
They didn't ask us to do this.
No, but
the Bureau did.
Yeah.
The lower basin actually thinks it's stupid. They're going along with it, and they gave us the room. And John Ensminger says it's a heavy lift, and he said, hey, if you put it there, gravity works, the water's going to come to us, so they're fine with it, but they think it's stupid, and they don't. It's an entirely, environmental NGOs want it, some cities want it, the Bureau of Reclamation wants it, and I don't know if CWCB actually want it or they're doing it out of a sense of obligation because the Bureau, the upper basin had to do something since the lower basin is taking all of these shortages, so this is the thing that they settled on. They basically took what they're doing in Imperial Valley and Palo Verde and Coachella, and it works there because Metropolitan buys the water from farms, fallows these row crops, which are easy to fallow. It's easy for them to buy it and put it in their taps in Los Angeles and San Diego. It works there, and they'll pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just backwards up here because we're drying up farms and we're sending it to Lake Powell. We can never get that water back, and nobody wants to pay for it until there's a crisis. If there is no crisis, we're just drying up farms and wasting money for no reason. So, okay, let's keep moving. Like I said, we're gonna have to cut this short. I talked to a lawyer, MVI's lawyer. If I was gonna keep pushing Section 603, he told me to go to the congressional record and find out what the intent was. I thought it was gonna be really hard, but I went within a day and found the 1968 congressional record. Basically what Section 603 was is after the UCRC read Tipton's report, they drew up a set of demands that they had to have before Congress authorized the Central Arizona Project. And these demands were drawn up in 65 and 66, and they basically said that all federal projects within the lower Colorado River must be limited so as not to prejudice, impair, or preclude the future federal authorization of projects which are required for the annual consumptive use by upper basin states of the water that may be physically available after delivery of some, this is complicated, but basically it's saying is we need to get our entitlement after we fulfill our obligations to the lower basin, 7.5 million acre feet, we have to be able to develop our water. With CAP and and the Mexico obligation, if there's no surplus waters, we couldn't do that. This was the first attempt, but they had to negotiate it with the other 7 states. So the next slide, I think it probably has the next version. These are the rest of the conditions. They also demand, this is important, they demanded that the Congress authorize a project to import water into the Colorado River.
An augmentation deal.
Augmentation, they asked for 2.5 million acre feet of augmentation. And once that water was started being delivered, it would relieve the states of the Colorado River Basin from the Mexico obligation. So basically the federal government, they were asking the federal government to have an obligation to relieve us of the Mexico obligation. That reduces our demands from Lake Powell from 8.23 million acre feet back to 7.5 million acre feet. That's enough breathing room that it removes most of the risk from us right now. If you look at the West Slope risk studies that they're putting out to the rain table right now, there is a risk that we won't be able to deliver 8.23 million acre feet on a 10-year moving average. It's a pretty good risk if the droughts continue. Their estimates for the risk of not being able to provide 7.5 million acre feet right now are 0. So if we can get back to 7.5, we have enough breathing room. That also relieves us of 750,000 acre feet of obligation every year. That's 1.5 of these stupid demand management banks every year. So this is the way to solve this problem, way more than the demand management bank is. And they wanted Glen Canyon rules so that Glen Canyon shall be operated so it shall not be drawn down except as necessary to comply with Article 3. That was the original intent of 602, is they're not supposed to take too much water from Lake Powell because it's our security blanket. Unfortunately, by the time the interim guidelines came around, the 9 million acre feet come around, that's exactly what they're doing. They're overdrawing it. So we're in a constant risk of losing power ahead and the ability to deliver water to the lower basin. So anyway, the UCRC with Section 603, this is the progenitor to it, they were basically saying you have got to protect our entitlement because the lower basin is taking our entitlement. So it's pretty clear what the intent was here. Next. There have been at least 15 studies on importing water to the lower basin. This is the most extravagant by the Army Corps of Engineers. They were going to take 100 million acre feet. This is NWAPA, the North American Water and Power something or other. The Corps of Engineers wanted to take water from the Yukon and the rivers in British Columbia and the Columbia and bring them south, 100 million acre feet. This was back in the 50s and the 60s when the Army Corps of Engineers thought they could do anything. They'd done Tennessee Valley and they had nuclear power, and this is the most extravagant, but quickly go through the rest of these. There's 6 or 8 different importation studies. If they spend as much time, let's just keep going through this. If they, okay, let's stop. If they'd spend as much time building something as doing all these studies, we might have some importation by now. But this is one of the probably more viable ones. Basically, they wanted to put a dam on the Klamath River, and there's 12 million acre feet of water there. And they basically wanted to back it up through the Trinity River, and they were going to put a 55-mile tunnel over to Shasta Lake and get it into California, and then take it from there south to the Los Angeles and so forth through the aqueducts. Unfortunately, Northern California said no to this because of environmental, and they didn't want the river stolen, and Southern California said no to this. So
Somebody's pacemaker's going off.
That's probably the timer. I think I'm out of time.
It's not.
No.
We still have a few minutes.
The key thing is Southern California opposed this. You would think they would be in favor of it, is because they knew if they did this, that they would have to relinquish some of their 4.4 million acre foot claim on the Colorado River, and it's their water and it's easy, whereas this is complicated. So unfortunately, this was probably the best hope we had to get augmentation, and there's plenty of water up there. I'm certainly investigating one of the way forwards later. I don't think you could dam this river anymore. It's in a California Wild and Scenic. They're taking dams out of this river now, so the chances of doing a project, and there's a Anpo Dam is right in the middle of a small tribal, like a few hundred people, and they value their fish. The fishery is very good, so. But I'm exploring the possibility that you could maybe do a diversion right at the estuary where it enters the Pacific Ocean. Again, there's 12 million acre feet going into the ocean, and what is it doing? It's being turned into salt water. It's a 700-mile pipeline. It wouldn't be cheap. But if you could build a non-obstructive diversion and take water out of there and send it a pipe south, that is maybe one of the imports that could be done. So there's so many studies I'm sifting to see. There is a proposal in one of the minis. There's a proposal for a California undersea aqueduct. They were going to basically take a pipeline, bolt it to the floor of the ocean, and run along the coast. And that way you didn't have to do all of the pain that you have to do to get right-of-ways and build an aqueduct. But the cost for that when they did it in 1995 was like $30 billion, so it wasn't really reasonable. But they've got HDPE pipe like we use now. They've got 13 and a half foot pipes now, 2,000 feet long. You can basically, they use them for oil field, undersea oil fields. You could basically tow them out and weld them. You might be able to build one a lot cheaper now than then. So that's part of the looking forward. So let's keep moving. We got to wrap this up here. Oh, there's the undersea aqueduct right there. So.
There you go.
And Pacific Southwest was another basically another one of these coastal pipelines. Let's keep moving. This is basically what I said before. Mexico Water Trees is an obligation. They wanted a comprehensive feasibility study. This is basically what they're heading towards the 1968 CRPBA. Let's keep moving. Okay, the first problem with the importation is Floyd Dominy and the Bureau, they wanted to build 2 dams in the Grand Canyon, more than are already there. They were on both sides of the national park. There's 1,000 feet of drop there, and they basically wanted to capture it for hydroelectric generation. So they were going to build 2 dams at Marble Canyon and Hualapai, where the lava falls. One of those is where the lava falls is. And they were going to get millions of watts of peaking power. And basically how Bureau projects have always worked is they would get hydroelectric projects, and they would generate power in cash that could be used to fund other projects. So basically they wanted to build these 2 dams in Grand Canyon, get this power, and they were going to use that to fund and subsidize these importation projects. Unfortunately, in 1966, Sierra Club came along. They were probably the first environmental NGO as we know them today. David Browder had 2 marketing people, and he ran the ad that you see on the left in all of the big city newspapers. Should we also flood the Sistine Chapel so tourists can get nearer the ceiling? And it apparently was a good ad campaign because
What a nice metaphor.
it's a good ad campaign because people in the cities read it and they started flooding their congressmen with mail and telephone calls. And this is the start of the environmental era. 50s and 60s, 40s, 50s, 60s, World War II, Cold War, nuclear power, that was the engineering era in America. We could do anything. 1966, 1970, NEPA is the start of the environmental era, and it became nearly impossible to do anything on these big engineering projects because they get tied up forever in litigation and environmental regulations. So unfortunately, they blew up the 2 dams. That blew up the funding, so the importation projects basically died. Next. 1968, LBJ was president, and he was mired in the Vietnam War, and he gave his famous "I shall not seek" speech, and he basically said he wasn't going to run for a second term. Unfortunately for Arizona and Wayne Aspinall and the Dolores Project, Stuart Udall was the Interior Secretary at the time, so Arizona had an inside track because the Interior Secretary was an Arizonan. Carl Hayden was the chair of the House Appropriations Committee, so he had control of all of the money of the federal government, so he had an enormous amount of power, but he was on his last leg. He was in failing health. And Floyd Dominy, the Bureau Commissioner, was the guy that built the dams. And unfortunately, when LBJ was voted out, Nixon came in, Udall was gone, blah, blah, blah. So this was their last chance to get the Central Arizona project approved, was in March of 1968. So they pushed it through no matter what it would take. And that's what the rest of this is. Let's go through it quickly. There was one opponent. It was the state of Wyoming. And this is in there. Nobody seems to know it very much, but their Congressman Harrison from Wyoming gave an impassioned speech opposing this bill. He was the sole opposing vote. And what was going on at the time is Floyd Dominy, the Bureau Commissioner, told every state that if you did not support this project, you would never get another reclamation project in your life. So they were on the horns of dilemma. Wyoming either had to support it, in which case they might get future reclamation funding, but the upper basin's water entitlement would be gone, so there wouldn't be any water for it. So this is basically a sailor from Pennsylvania asking, was Dominy threatening them? And Harrison said that Dominy called up the governor and said, you'll never get another project if you oppose this, but they still did. And the next slide explains why they did. Wyoming is vitally concerned that the passage of this bill shall not interfere with our use of water allocated to use under the terms of the Colorado River Compacts. There will not be sufficient water in the something or other of the Colorado River to permit fulfillment of all the commitments under the compact now in effect. There must be an importation of water into the basin if all states are to be permitted to use this water. All of the assurances in the world concerning the validity of compact allocations will be rendered ineffective if there's not sufficient water to meet the obligations. The problem is that since the 2 Grand Canyon dams were gone, they didn't have the funding or the authorization. These projects were very expensive, so they didn't put it in the bill that they had to augment, the Department of Interior had to augment the river. What they put in was they had to do a study on how to augment the river. And especially Saylor and some of the back east congressmen, they were getting really tired of all of the money that the Bureau was spending out west, so they didn't want to spend a huge amount of money it would take to divert from the Klamath or the Columbia, and it would have taken a lot of money. The Northwest, Senator Scoop Jackson, they opposed it violently, taking it out of Columbia, so they put a moratorium on it, so there was no chance of getting it from there. Let's keep moving. Like I said, we got to get going here. Okay, so what are the consequences of this? And this is an exchange from Wayne Aspinall and Mo Udall, Arizona and Colorado. They were both getting projects out of this. The Dolores project was in this bill. Animas La Plata was in this bill. Dallas Divide, Central Utah. So we were getting stuff out of this too. Mr. Aspinall says, does not this all go to the point that when the upper basin begins to use its entitlement in the Colorado River Compact area, do not then wish to be placed in a position that the facilities for the Central Arizona Valley project could no longer be operated satisfactorily? Mr. Udall from Arizona, the one pushing CAP, said precisely, because that's what it means. What they're saying here is if we use our full compact entitlement and there's no longer any surplus water, CAP can no longer operate, or it's going to have to be cut back. Next. So this gets to section 603, which was also in this bill. I've been writing it for a year now, and you guys have all seen it, but it doesn't have an enforcement terms on it, and it doesn't have an implementation terms on it, but if you read it, the more I read it, the more I like it. It's not particularly precisely worded, but it's basically saying the rights of the upper basin to the consumptive use of water available to that basin in the Colorado system under the Colorado River Compact shall not be reduced or prejudiced by any use of such water in the lower basin.
That's pretty clear.
The bare minimum is if there is shortages, if there's no surplus water, Central Arizona project is the first one to be shut off. They don't agree with that because it provides water to all of North Phoenix. So I don't know what I'm not a lawyer. I'm going to disclaimer that when I give this. I don't know what the implications are of this. Every lawyer I ask, they either won't talk about it or they deny it means anything or they have no clue what it means. I asked TWCD's lawyer, they researched it. They can find no interpretation whatsoever because it's never been litigated. My mission for the last year is I've showed this to 100 people. I've showed it to people that are in the room. Some of them have never seen this. They've never read it. So, and these people are representing us.
Representing us and trying to protect our water rights in this state, and they don't even know it's here.
If they do know it's here, they don't know what it means, or they say we can't use it.
It seems pretty self-evident what it means.
Well, if you go to a court, who knows?
Well, but
the important thing to me, I don't know when it'll be triggered. It may have been triggered in the past. There was a case in 2009 Eagle River, Denver Water, CWCB, they were trying to figure out what our entitlement was after the 2007 interim guidelines were. CWCB was saying we had 1.5 million acre feet left to develop, but by the time the trial ended, they came to the conclusion we might not have any more water to develop. And the key part to me, and I brought this up with DWCD's lawyer again, is, and I think, but I don't know, if they try to call us for non-compliance of the 2007 interim guidelines, if we're not releasing 9 or 9.5 million acre feet of POWL, I have to believe this guarantees they can't do it, because as long as we're in compact compliance, they cannot interfere with our water. And that's important, because that's the first crisis we're going to face. There's a whole bunch of other things. They're hoarding water in aquifers down there.
Yeah.
They're storing water in named accounts in Meade. They're saying that we might be called over power head or target elevation. The way I read it is we have to do 7.5 million acre feet.
Period.
And we may have to do the Mexico obligation, because we agreed we would do half of the Mexico obligation in 1968 until this augmentation water arrived, and then we would be relieved of that obligation. And that's important, so let's go to the next one. So there was a study that was required by the Department of Interior to augment the Colorado River. It was supposed to come out by 1977. They rushed it. It came out in 1975. Again, Carl Hayden had retired. Floyd Dominy was fired. I won't go into why. They let him retire. He got his pension.
Blackmail?
He got his pension fully vested. They let him stay long enough to do that. NEPA was enacted in 1970, so the environmental movement was in full swing. Wayne Aspinall was voted out in 1972. I have to find out why, but I think he backed the Wild and Scenic River Act, and he was doing some environmental causes, but he was voted out in 1972. And one of the important is the OPEC oil embargo was in 1973. So when the Department of Interior, they rushed it and they put it out in 1975, and that sentence at the top is the thing they said. Since the passages of the Act, the 1968 Act, the national national priorities have emerged. They were way more focused on oil shale production because of the OPEC embargo. They knew that the Colorado River supply would not meet demands by 1990, but good hydrology meant it stretched out to 2000. They were planning for augmentation by 1995 to 2000, but when that time came around, they kicked the can down the road. They basically said they could do 1.3 million acre feet by weather modification, which is cloud seeding, which is optimistic, but that was the only augmentation they really brought to the river. And I should probably wrap it up there and give you time to talk to the rest of the panel and start.
Do they have any proof of what that cloud seeding is providing right now? Is there any real documentation of what it?
Ken would probably be the best person to step forward because he kind of liaisons. They just had a workshop on this at the meeting, and there's a study that's in my Snowy is a Idaho experiment. They've got Wyoming has a cloud radar, and they've actually seeded a cloud from an airplane, and they've actually seen it creating ice crystals. But I'll defer to Ken on the rest of that.
You want to take that up now, Jim?
I mean,
yeah, let's go to interactive.
yes,
I don't really.
if you
Quick
can.
answer, and then we can talk later, because it takes its own
Ken
time.
Curtis, head of DWCD,
General Manager.
General Manager.
Thanks, Commissioner. So the best study that tried to quantify it was in Wyoming over 10 years. They tried to take a couple of mountain ranges that basically faced the west, southwest, and they alternated seeding the storms to get a fully randomized experiment over 10 years, and I think they extended 12 years. Normally, under that kind of random statistical analysis, you look for 95% certainty. And they only came up with about 70 to 75% certainty. So they will not claim that it's beyond all doubt. But it is a natural system. They identified a slight problem in their experiment. And so that's the best evidence we have that it can be in the neighborhood of upwards to 15%, but it can also be as low as 3%. So it's varying. They claimed 8% looked like what they found. Beyond that, the Snowy experiment and some others have proven that it does work. They've done the radar and they can see it being working, but they can't quantify it yet. So quantification's an unknown. It's a little hard to pin down. And then the way I look at it is we know the physical properties that can work both in the lab and now proven by Snowy up in the air by cloud seeding. with airplanes in that case. The problem is, we have contractors, we do ground-based, we do airplanes. Like any contract, how good does the contractor perform? So to get your 8%, maybe 10, you gotta have good operations. And they don't always have good eyesight. We don't even have a radar. So one of the things that we're working on locally, Frank included, is we're trying to hone in and modernize our operations so we get good contract operations. Then we think we'll be maximizing it. And then we'll start looking a little harder at trying to prove some of that quantification. Because we do know it works, but are we doing the right steps to make it work, optimized? We're working on that. That would be my short answer, and you could go hours on this.
Can I ask you about the radar, Ken?
Sir.
I know that they just put a new one in La Plata County. I know they put one in.
A temporary.
Would it be beneficial? I mean, how important would it be if there was one here?
Oh, it definitely helps. Right now, they're using models, and if you've ever looked at the radars, we have Grand Junction, Albuquerque, over at Flagstaff, and so we have the whole. And our weather storms, our real precip makers are coming out of the southwest. Get the moisture coming up, cold front dips down, boom, the storm hits southwest is our best. So yes, it'll close that radar gap, that blind spot. So they are using models out of NOAA and WRF, water. There are various models they're looking at, but that's what they are. They're models that says, well, the storm's coming in this way, here's your wind pattern, fire up this cloud seeder, up, over, make your snow making. Radar will confirm that much better on where the front's really moving, where the wind patterns are. There's a couple other tools, radiometers, we're talking about investing in. So definitely we'll have more confirmation on the storm physical location and how it's moving. And so that should get them to better put the seed material in the right place at the right time. And hopefully that'll go in next year. Frank might pick up on that one. He's a little closer involved than I am on the radar.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
You want me to go next?
Whenever you're ready.
I'll try and be relatively brief.
Pull your microphone down to you a little, Don.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
I think what Ed's done is really, really important. I still can't believe that I'm not a kid anymore, but I grew up with watching all of this, and this is the history that he's pulled out is how I was taught. Today, there are a lot younger people than me that are truly in the negotiating chairs. I don't know Becky Mitchell's age, but Becky, James, a lot of those people didn't learn this history as it happened, and some may not be aware of what is there to the degree they need to be to do the job that we need them to do for us. So I think that this story needs to be continue to be told. It's just absolutely critical. The stuff I emphasized, the slide where McDonald said what the upper basin position is, we've got to flesh that out and go there. So want to segue also with what Ken said, forest health issues, things we've hinted at. What do we do as we move forward? A lot of those places, I've always thought cloud seeding would be one of the more difficult ones, but Andy Mueller's told me he's actually optimistic that we might get some more decent numbers. Forest health management places to measure the amount of water that we might get out of that, I'd suspect, I feel quite strongly, is going to be easier than really measuring true demand management water that you can get from where you try to demand it, manage it, all the way to Powell. So in this near future, from today until the end of the present set of interim guidelines, 2026, those years, we really need to focus our efforts and priorities in the right places and getting better measurement on any water that might be helpful to understand this whole situation. Probably, in my mind, should be the focus much more than simply how do you design and get ready to implement a demand management program for the state of Colorado.
So Don, for the sake of the audience, could you explain what the forest health management looks like and how that impacts our watershed?
I don't want to take a lot of my time, Shaq, to delve into that, other than I'll simply say what fire and where the forests are in today's world has west-wide made this a national issue. It's a really strong state issue where there is a ton of money being pointed at, effort being generated to try then and improve forest management, wherever that may take us. And locally, we're really involved with doing that much more constructively in a manner that's quite useful for redeveloping some logging industry, for thinning and those kinds of things. The point I really want to make from a water perspective, that we need to really do a good job of measuring water that is a consequence of any forest management thing, whether it's things that we do deliberately on our own to solve a fire problem, or whether it's a fire. In every place where we can gather data, we need to be gathering the data that tells us what's the impact to quantity of water that ends up in a stream and ends up into Powell from the upper basin for all of us, but in the whole basin. So,
But I actually work on that in public lands, and I can describe that in one paragraph. You have conifer trees, the snow lands on the branches or the needles, and it's dark, and they're up in the air, and the snow doesn't reach the ground. And so the evaporation and the loss of the moisture hitting the ground causes less runoff. So you cut more of the trees down, you have less of the snow holding onto the needles, and you create more water.
And the trees that you cut down would consume less water too, correct?
Trees are a crop just like farm.
And so how do you, I guess my question is, how do you quantify that? Do you estimate so much water per inch of the diameter of the tree, or do you measure it in the river?
I think there's a number of ways, Shaq, to try and think about doing that, just like what Bonnie's doing here with the phreatophyte stuff, the tamarisk and the Russian olive. That's one way. I think that probably there's gauge records that you can use to do things. It's basically, it's similar kind of stuff that all the science about crop, because when you own an ag water right, what you truly own, according to the state as they've legally defined it, is simply the consumptive use of the crop that you're raising. That's the only water you really own to transfer from a place to another. Everything else that you may be using to get your water to your crop is carriage water. And that carriage water does things like build groundwater, the phreatophytes rob it and steal it and go do different things with it. But it's that whole water balance equation that we've got to get a lot better handle on. There's a lot of work that's kind of out there, but nobody's focusing solely on measuring it. And that's what, in this near term, we've got to pull measurement numbers to compare to demand management water numbers. This is an answer to you, Larry Don. What can we advocate for to make this work today? I mean, it's that measurement piece, and all of these other pieces is a huge piece of that. So I went to this was a tangent I wasn't going to go to in terms of, I got a little place I want to go here to cover. But I mean, this is an important one.
That's the extremely important one. In fact,
Yes.
he's going to give a presentation later today that's is going down those same lines.
I should point out, if in the path forward part, I have excerpts from a paper that was compiled in 2003. It's called Forest and Water from a Colorado Perspective. Denver Water, Northern Water, a bunch of water agencies did this during the last drought. They have a forest experimental station up on the Fraser River, and they're basically clear-cutting forest and thinning forest, and they're measuring over time how much water savings. So there is science behind this, and there's a bunch of graphs later in the presentation.
As you guys know, because I shipped it straight to you and you really helped motivate how I phrased my words in it, I developed my water policy piece. And I tried to define the places that I think we needed to really put our efforts. It was based on you two as much as anybody. You weren't here long enough to give me the feedback that I got from both Keenan and Larry Don about what's the right place for where do we move from here? Prioritize all of our money, human resources, and whatever in the near term where we're going. So this is where I've evolved stronger. I've actually been there the whole time. I'm getting more emphatic and black and white when I articulate it. That spending a ton of time on demand management, you already heard those words out of me, to develop how we're going to implement that program, I think is not the best place to be spending our state or anybody's time between now and 2026. We've got to focus on this next set of interim guidelines. That's really, really critical, and as we do that, then all of this water measurement stuff is a really key component to have a fair discussion about it all. And so that's where I've been going. This is where I want to push. We really do. I mean, literally, Brent Newman, the CWCB guy that was pushing this, I asked him in a meeting one time, public meeting, it wasn't a whole bunch of people there. I said, Brent, does the state have the resources? Does CWCB have the resources to really do a ton of the work that you're pushing out right now, and your goal is to do demand management and also really do the focus that they need to be ready for the next set of interim guideline negotiations? And his answer was kind of, no, we don't, Don. Well, damn it, that then needs to, pardon my language, that's a place that we need to be shouting upstairs all the way. And literally at Water Congress summer conference in August, they had a vote of the people in the audience, and with the way they do it with text stuff back, and a majority of the people in that audience was telling the state then, focus on interim guidelines over demand management. So I think that Ed and I and others and other people think like-mindedly, that they're seeing that that's the place we need to focus. So I wanted to start with that and this foundation, because as we focus on those interim guidelines, the Colorado compact people and users of the water there, we've been kicking the can down the road, because fundamental was always to the compact has been, if you don't use it, that doesn't mean it can't get used. If the upper basin doesn't develop, the lower basin can use it until the upper basin does it. I mean, this is what Ed just so in such really good detail really pushed. Time to quit kicking the can down the road. I've heard a number of times the accepted wisdom, if people ever develop, you're never going to get them to undevelop. If a city ever grows, you're never going to get it to ungrow. But the structural deficit, as it's been called, the overuse in the lower basin is acknowledged and recognized as the structural deficit and quantified in that manner. But it's that structural deficit that's got to disappear. And CAP is the junior user in the lower basin and on the river in terms of using water that they don't have an entitlement to do. We've got the Dolores project is the same dates and whatever in terms of the federal and where we are, but it still was grabbing a piece of unused Colorado's water supply pie to use it. So it's not near the risk CAP is. So with that transition and thinking about folks in that CAP and where I've gone with this, that was going to be my two-sentence transition segue to where I wanted to just share a little bit, just to give you a real brief preview, and so I'll try and keep this brief. My Family Farm Alliance Board hat has been a place where I have learned a lot, because its eyes are big. It tries to be a 17 western state contiguous with where all the Bureau projects are, organization, and its mission is to try and protect irrigated agriculture in those 17 reclamation western states. And that's given me then the ability to make friends and learn a ton about lower basin folks as well as upper basin folks. And so that Family Farm Alliance's project that we've been working on since we left our annual conference in February of this year has been what we call a Family Farm Water Review, but building on some panelists and the kind of thing that we did at that conference, our annual conference. We're trying to get something in writing out about that has interviews of our general manager of 10 user folks, 5 in the upper basin, 5 in the lower folks, in the lower basin, and intros for the upper basin by Jennifer Gimbel, the former executive director of CWCB, and for the lower basin by Brenda Berman, with her, who's commissioner of reclamation with roots in Arizona and a little bit back to California, so lower basin roots. So pretty interesting document, some really interesting stories to come out. So I just wanted to grab a couple quotes out of some of those stories and share them with you real quickly. And Palo Verde is the water user, about 152,000 acres there on the Colorado River. that has the senior, I think it's the senior water right in Colorado, in California, of Colorado River water, and they're the ones that have put together the plan to lease fallow some of their water and share it with Metropolitan Water District, and they officially put that in, I don't know, 10 years ago, more than that, but it's looked as the template and the model for what we should do and how you're going to do things in the wave of the future, where we go. Well, they filed a suit against Metropolitan Water District, that board did, I think it was the board, and because Metropolitan Water, after they got this temporary arrangement put in place, they've put somewhere around $250 million into buying land in Palo Verde that they then can rent out to the farmers as the landowner, and have their tenant farmers with the terms that they choose to put into their renter terms to use that agreement. Has Palo Verde folks pretty spooked. These are the kinds of stories. You never get perfect lessons, I don't think, as you learn from any other places, but this case study stuff where you pick lessons that'll be really useful to your community, that's a really useful lesson, that concern. That one I wanted to lead with. No surprise here, but very explicitly, one of the people put in his story that some parties are already organizing and preparing to use post-226 guidelines as a way to ensure that water moves from ag to urban uses. No surprise, but they're doing it. And that's what we're watching unfold in the news stories around us, whether they're lower basin interests or upper basin interests. In effect, I'm the kind of zero-sum guy as I look at water use for where legally it's used. You got four places it goes in the water balance equation. It goes into ag rights, it goes to environmental rights or uses, whether they're rights or not. It's those phreatophytes robbing my ag water on my way from McPhee to my farm. And to go, then you've got your municipal rights. Those are the three bigger uses. And in between, you've got water going in and out of groundwater storage, which is a really critical component that we don't measure. But at any rate, it's those folks who are really focused not on ag, but are on municipal interests and environmental interests, are those players that are really trying to design where we move from now so that we ensure. I literally heard one of the people say, well, if you're not going to get any water from ag, where are you going to get it? No place else. Well, I don't agree with that. And it's our job to teach them why. But then Central Arizona Project. Family Farm Alliance board member now is a CAP water user, and he's one of the guys that got interviewed, and his piece was titled in our deal, A Grim Future. The fate of CAP ag is already determined, is what he says. And that fate means ag's not using a drop of surface water, CAP water, in its near future. All they're trying to get right now is some money so that they can transition from their surface CAP water back to the groundwater. And the whole reason for CAP was driven partially by trying to quit using their groundwater because they're mining it. I point that out. There's an acceptance of the CAP folks, at least to some degree, that they don't get to use it anymore. They're going to fight like hell to keep as much of it as long as they can, but that's not our job to negotiate, help them with their wish there. It might be my mission as as Family Farm Alliance, where we're trying to save everybody, but we know we don't get to save everybody.
Would that be part of the reason that they're now taking part of this surplus water and pumping it into aquifers down?
Oh, absolutely. No, they've replenished.
When they drop the CAP, they're going to have aquifers full of.
Well, they're putting in aquifers they can't even tap because they'll tap them sometimes.
The whole interim guidelines was this last set that we're operating under right now was because they had depleted their aquifers to a degree that they knew it was a terrible place to be, and that they were really mining them. And this set of interim guidelines gave them the right to. It didn't ever get called this, and it wouldn't have been a beneficial use in Colorado. Well, anyhow, I don't know about going into that rat hole, but they took water, and it became what they chose to do with it was go replenish their aquifers and build it. And they've been building and building and building, where they've got decades of supply left. They can mine it back before they are totally out of water, but they at least know measured in, measured out, and some time frames. So as a state, they're going to have to wrestle with some really, really serious problems. Last thing in the world we want to do is have Colorado design itself to have that serious, serious problem future, because we're not there yet.
Where they put it in aquifers, needless to say, they're taking it out of Mead, which is pulling water out of Powell, which is putting risk on our back, so.
Sure.
Another user that put something in front of this Family Farm Alliance piece was out of the Yuma Valley. The senior water right in Arizona, I think, for their Colorado River Surface water rights.
And our lettuce. Lettuce.
Yes, absolutely, the nation's lettuce. The nation's lettuce. But other senior, one of the things, his statements in there is that senior water rights holders are going to have to continue to battle to hold on to the water that they have too. So there, to me, there's lessons to learn and to think about, because Arizona's got those really senior water rights and they've got the really junior CAP rights as they're wrestling with. Well, right here in our community, we've got really senior MVIC rights and our more junior DWCD rights that are partnered in McPhee out here that are just married together. We've got a unique place that we have to think about stuff from our community, different than any place else. We can learn some good lessons from reaching down and hearing these stories as well, was my point. And then the last quote that I wanted to just preview out of this document that we'll have it out and published and available electronically in the very near future, because I'm just working off of close to final draft to share these little quotes. But all the way through, the people in here say that the ag guys have to build coalitions with each other to try and do stuff to help counter where we are with the municipal and the environmental folks that may not see the things the way we see them. It's our job to teach our neighbors and our cities and our environmental people how much their interests are served by continuing with ag as well. So we've really got to, that's got to be a part of what we message every place we can. And one of them quoted specifically the similarity between upper basin and where we are and lower basin users. So that's a place where that broader view is a really important place to go.
I just want to say something because I can't get it out of my head listening to you two. And it would seem like that the logical way of solving the problem, if I was the lower basin, if I would, instead of using it for lawyers and demand management, I would give the money to the upper basin to thin the forest, to cloud seed, to do the research to see how effective those things are, so that you would produce more water in the long run, and then everybody would benefit if you did those things. Correct? I mean, wouldn't that be the logical way to get more water or to satisfy everybody, is to
The lower basin does fund the cloud seeding effort. Ken could probably give you some quantification of that. That's their big contribution. The other thing I should point out, to build on what Don's saying, I don't want to wipe out agriculture in Arizona or California. Ag's in this together. We want to be able to grow food in this country. We don't want to import from China and Chile and Mexico and Brazil. So part of the way forward that I have here is, I haven't done a lot of work on it yet. I'm about done researching all the history. I want to start looking forward too. There's stuff out there that can be done. They keep talking about it, but again, we don't have this engineering culture anymore where we do it, and the environmental regulations stop us from doing big things. But Israel's building desalination plants now. They work. They've got good technology. The reverse osmosis, they're using lava rocks to filter the water so they don't biofoul the reverse osmosis. They're generating like a 500,000 acre feet for their cities and farms. They actually have a surplus. They went from a water crisis to having a surplus now. Israel's a tiny, not particularly rich country. Why can't America do that? Because if we built a 500,000 or 1 million acre feet of desalination on the West Coast, California Metropolitan would have a water supply that's theirs. And they wouldn't have to keep taking it out of the Colorado River. It costs some money, it takes some engineering. We give a lot of money to Israel every year in aid. They should really come back here and bring that technology and work with us and and the environmental NGOs need to get on board to stop fighting it, and they need to start building desalination plants. Importation's not easy, but there's millions of acre feet in Northern California. You could probably figure out a way. It's not the cheapest thing in the world, but you could probably figure out a way to get it down here. I don't want to be in these zero-sum games where one person wins and another one loses, because it's
Exactly,
bad
that's
for
what
everybody. So we got to start doing this path forward that's not stupid. Demand management's stupid, so buy and drive stupid.
Well, circling right back to your specific question about forest health. They're up here they're doing cloud seeding, Lower Basin is with money, partnering with that. Forest health issues, they would be in that same camp. I'm confident here again, this is a place that Arizona's ahead of the game in terms of knowing what's down there. Some of the best data that you can get is out of Arizona. It's came from the two Apache reservations, San Carlos, I think, and White Mountain both, where they've been doing forest management stuff where they were able to bypass federal stuff where they've done things there actively. Carolyn Dunmeyer here, one of our community members, she worked on some of that stuff in her earlier life to where she's pointed that as a resource to go look for some of the data. But I literally characterize it as we do any forest health management of any kind, I mean from literally timberline, from the rocks at timberline, and I used to stop it at the pinyon juniper, but as I've got to thinking a little bit about my brother David living in Tucson and watching the cactus disappear in the Tucson country around his neighborhood and in the county surrounding him during the drought since he moved there around 2000 and what we've had before he left several years ago. Maybe even the cactus are eating water that used to get to springs that helped your flows at wherever. We don't know that stuff, but I've been paying attention here again to you, Larry Dawn. I've been interested in saving all of our country for cattle my whole life. That's the way I was raised. And in the 90s, in the cattle-free in 93 era and whatever, there was stuff that I read somewhere, I don't remember where it was, but a place down in Gallup in the PJ country where as fire did something to disappear or different things where there was real water and riparian stuff coming back when trees were thinned down there from that place. I've been watching that stuff my whole life. And as I've been having this conversation up here in the recent years, there's stuff in the PACUS that John Caron, the guy that does the RICO, the risk study, where he used to do some modeling on a job on the PACUS somewhere down there, just where you get to PJ upriver, north of I-40 or whatever in New Mexico. Same kind of thing. Kelly Bader, Margie told me before she died, something that happened on his ranch he bought over there on the Upper Purgatory where a fire came and she was over there some years and Kelly was just amazed because had riparian stuff coming back where things were coming after the cattle, after the fire did its thing and then it began to rejuvenate and whatever. Family Farmlands had a guy from northwest Utah tell the same story of a river, streams coming out of there in the Great Basin stuff that was amazing, the story he told. Those are the stories that if we get that quantified better, that you'll have access to in your circles, that we need to bring to this discussion.
We should probably make sure we get the rates.
Yeah, we're getting on to our time allotment, so Frank, we'd like to hear from you.
Frank comes from the Upper Gunnison, so he has a Colorado River Basin perspective that's different from here, so that's a good thing to hear.
Good.
Yeah, thank you so much, County Commissioners, for letting us talk about water. It's great to see your interest and support in water issues in southwestern Colorado. I kind of feel like the guy on the end of the ditch as far as time allotment is concerned today. But I did want to just say a few things. As stated previously, I'm the new executive director for the Southwestern Water Conservation District. I started September 1st. As Ed mentioned, I came from the Upper Gunnison River Water Conservancy District, where I was there for 13 years. Prior to that, I was Division 4 engineer, administering water rights in the Gunnison and San Miguel, Lower Dolores. And prior to that, I was here in southwestern Colorado for 11 years inspecting dams out of Durango. Very familiar with the MVIC system as far as their storage structures. As far as southwestern, we represent all our parts of 9 counties. Don is here representing Montezuma County. Bob Wolf, our board president, is La Plata County representative. We at Southwest want to focus more on reaching out to our local communities and seeing what we can do, how we can provide leadership in water issues, how we can help our constituents in water matters, be it from great, 30,000 foot level of Colorado River issues down to what can we do to help on the Mancos River or structures on the Dolores or whatever. So please reach out to us if there's any way we can help. We want to be part of the community in solving water issues, big and small. Couple of things that are coming up for Southwest. Number one, we have both November 1st, we have our Southwest seminar that is being held in Durango at the Doubletree on November 1st. I think it's 9 till 3, I believe. So love to have you come and join us for that. Also, starting November 1st, ending December 13th is our grant program for 2020, an application period. So we'd really like you to take advantage of funding opportunities that Southwestern District has to help with water matters in the basin.
I think our weed management gal will be right in the middle.
Excellent, thank you. Also, in building on what Ken Curtis said previously about the weather modification and cloud seeding, Ken and I have worked together previously in doing weather or remote generators for cloud seeding. They're 3 times as effective, 3 times more solution being put into the clouds to generate, and they can be done remotely by meteorologists to turn on and off as seeding conditions are ideal. Ken was instrumental in putting one up near Groundhog Reservoir, I think 3 years ago. Another one was just installed just west of Hesperos ski area this year, so that'll help provide seeding activity for the upper Mancos as well as the La Plata and Animas River basins. For 2020, we've got in the budget another generator to be installed somewhere in the seeding area. So we are really taking as Ed was mentioning earlier, about not trying to work on demand management, but how to actually get more water in our basin, and so we're focusing on that. So I guess those are some of the things we're working on, but and one other thing is talking about the UCRC, the Upper Colorado River Commission, and Becky Mitchell is the new director, and I'm thrilled, as mentioned previously, she's going to be an improvement for representation for Colorado on that. She's got, I think they call it the trident, which is the 3 points of the spear, and so she's relatively new to Colorado River issues compared to her 2 henchmen, which are John McLeod, who I served with at the Upper Gunnison River Water Conservancy District, and then David Robbins, David Robbins is the other person. The two guys with tremendous background in Colorado River issues. So, and then supporting that trident is there's a legal committee, which Beth Van Verst, who's Southwest's attorney, is on that committee. I'm just was appointed to serve on the engineering advisory committee on that. Ken, are you on that as well? No? Okay. Well, Ken will be the voice in my ear, as well as Ed and Don, in taking the message to the UCRC and advocating for the information that Ed has worked so hard to unearth and move that forward. So anyway, we're working for you, and please let us know if there's anything more we can do for you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank. Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much. Ken, yes.
Can I ask everybody here one question?
Uh-oh.
Well, no, I mean, you guys have shown a lot of leadership.
So one thing we haven't heard about, demand management's going to unfold over several years. Not that we're going to slow down. We got to make these forums. We got to pressure, because the negotiations 2026 are probably going to start next year. So I think this is great. But one thing is, you guys have put on some great leadership and some forums. Probably ought to look at Catlin and Coram. I think you're going to see them at a IBCC meeting coming up.
I think there's a Water Resources Committee hearing.
And at our Southwest seminar.
So after that, you know how their schedule goes. You'll never get them between January and May, June.
I actually run into them every month up in Denver. But.
So we might want to talk about when's the appropriate time for them to help us, decide how the Colorado legislature is probably going to play in this game, because I don't think we've heard the last of them. I'm trying to follow it remotely, but I know you have contact. Ed's reached out and may see him at IBCC and the interim water committee stuff, and Frank will. Are you on? Anyway, I just think that's something to bring into this discussion at the appropriate time. You guys put on a great forum, so you'd be great to host them. Thanks.
I did send this presentation to Catlin and Quorum and the federal or congressional delegation aides for this area, so they do have it back from them.
Good.
The one thing that, before I yield completely the time, Keenan, if I could, I pitched several last winter sometime, maybe about now, but I think that our local entities really need to develop a coherent local strategy. Nobody's going to watch out for our water like we will. And we've got a pretty, I'm not disappointed at all, but I pitched my piece then to Montezuma County Commissioners, DWCD Board, and MVI Board. And I think Montezuma County's stepped to the plate to help be a voice for the McCamel water users as well. But I think that cohesive voice as a community, we need to continue to focus on getting it more a cohesive voice. We've got a really good discussion going. The group right now are talking all between each other.
And I think also, Don, that MVIC needs to be tightly associated with all the things that you guys have brought forth here today, that they're...
Ed's there every month. I try to be there every meeting, or almost every time. So their board is engaged, Keenan.
Okay.
All I'm saying is that think about ways to more formally get a cohesive voice as we find opportunity. Because I think we've got a really robust discussion going that's healthy for all of us, but still developing that cohesive voice will be useful.
I'll tell you what I've seen watching you two. And when you guys first started, you're so technically, your jargon was, I could not follow you. You people in your world could, but somebody simple-minded like I couldn't. And you guys have sharpened your pencils to where somebody like me can understand it. And you have came strides in the way that when you started to make us absorb the information. I really appreciate how hard you worked at it.
It really helps to be able to practice and talk in front of people. One of my problems is Brent Newman gave his presentation on demand management about 100 times. He was so good at it. And it's kind of hard to do this stuff unless you practice it and talk to people and hear what they're saying. So every time we get a chance to practice on doing it, it does help a lot. So I should note that Brent Newman is left CWCB, and he's kind of a loss. He was in a lot of ways good. He was an adversary on this issue, and he was really good at his job. And he's gone back to Louisiana to the Audubon Society. So it's kind of a loss for the demand management crowd because he carried their message really well. And I've been learning from him because I've watched him a lot, and he was really good at it. So he taught me a lot. So.
And one of the pieces that I hope that we push is if a Tamarack drinks 300 gallons of water a day, if there's an agreement that can make all of these different things to where we can add more water, if it costs $50 million to thin 100,000 acres, if the lower basin's willing to do that, because we have the research that shows that it generates how many hundred or millions of gallons of water, that we go in that direction. He's going to give a presentation here about a whole different subject, but using research on how to fix a problem that just blew me away when he let me in on it. And I think that same thing can be used here. If we say, lower basin, we want to give you your water, let's do these things because it helps us all. If we clean up all the tamaracks along the Colorado River, it helps everybody. It helps the animals, the wildlife. If we thin the forest, it helps prevent forest fire. It's just a win-win all the way around.
The problem with the phreatophytes in the lower basin is there's an endangered species called the flycatcher, willow flycatcher. Unfortunately, it really likes living in there's an endangered species issue that they're actually prohibiting removal of phreatophytes in much of the lower basin. There's a map of where all these species are. So it's once again the road paved with good intentions. The environmentalists want to protect the endangered species, and now they're going to protect a phreatophyte that's taking all of our water. So
Well, it sounds like we can catch them so we can relocate them.
well, tough issue. All through all of these measures, the environmentalists are going to be an issue because they don't like us logging trees, and they don't like us removing phreatophytes if they threaten a species. The key point here is a lot of environmental NGOs. I went to Steamboat and we had a workshop there. All three of the environmental NGOs there, they were asked what their one issue with demand management was. We want to get more water in the rivers, and they're going to take it from ag and put it in the rivers. So we've got a problem because that's really what's pushing a lot of the demand management is they want to get water in the rivers. Are they going to stop us from thinning forests? Are they going to stop us from removing phreatophytes? And are they going to stop us from importing water out of other rivers? They're trying to build a desalination plant in Huntington Beach since 2003. It's been through 16 years of litigation by environmental NGOs. So they want to solve all these problems, but then they fight every solution other than taking it out of farmers. So that's a big problem we got to fix. So I should point out Salt River project they're doing forest. They're letting RFPs. They're thinning their forest. A couple of them called up my dad. They wanted to know how to build lumber, make lumber out of aspen trees. And
Yep, on the Mongolian Ram. They're leading.
So yeah, they're leading, but they're trying to do the same thing in New Mexico. But Wild Earth Guardians came in and filed a lawsuit about the Mexican spotted owl and shut the whole thing down. So I don't know. There's a lot of obstacles, but we really got to try to find a solution that works for everybody. So
Thank you, gentlemen.
thank you.
Very,
much.
very good, very informative morning.
Thanks
Thank
for
you a
your
lot, Ed,
support
Don,
on
and
it.
Frank. Yeah. Okay, Mel with the landfill. People just listen. Morning, Mel.
Good morning.
How are you today?
Dusty.
How many tires you got left?
None.
It's dwindling.
How's the
We are
grinder?
hoping to have it done by the end of the month.
How's that grinder working?
Slow.
What?
Very slow process.
Very slow. Why? What makes it slow? Just the nature
Because
of the.
if you go too fast, you'll bind it up. Then you're in there trying to cut all the stuff out. And then every hour, about 10 minutes, you gotta reverse it, back the wires out. And then
Oh.
once in a while, you have to go in there and actually cut them out. So it's a slow process.
It's a slow process. I got you.
Yeah.
But you're working 10 hours a day at it. I mean, they're.
Yeah, them guys are working down there. They really are. They're putting in a lot of overtime. They're coming in on Saturdays, trying to get this done before the end of the month. Because we
Yeah.
still have that huge limp out to grind too.
Yeah, we gotta get that, for sure, because we need that.
We need that.
Whether we finish the tires or not, we gotta grind them limbs before that shredder leaves.
And is it month by month? Can you just do it,
I
extended by a
don't-
week? Or
I'm waiting to see how close we are at the end of this week. I'm gonna call Wagner if we look like we might need it another week. I hope we don't have to. That's awful expensive. I mean, if we have a few tires left, next year when we rent it again to grind, we can finish them. Because we're permitted to store them now, so.
But that's probably a limited time, is it?
What's that?
Is there a time frame on the storage?
We can store up to 100,000.
But for.
Don't ever do that to me.
Right, right. Are there time limits?
No,
on
we're
it?
supposed to ship them out.
You still have to
Yeah.
meet your
But,
75%.
yeah, it's-
They still have that 75% tag.
But right
on.
now, I mean, we had almost 27,000 tires total with what I had previously before the cleanup, and then what, over 6,000 the county brought me. If they get real close, we'll probably have approximately 4,000 or 5,000 tires still on site, if we don't finish by the end of the month.
Mhm.
But they're working hard, he's really trying to get it done,
Yeah.
so. There was one thing in the spring when I took over, or, yeah, in the last winter, I guess, when I kind of took this job over. We postponed a loader that Chuck had put in the budget for our recycling down there.
Mhm.
And we postponed it because we thought CDPHE was gonna have a grant, or we could apply for a grant to get that. Well, they did come out with a grant, but the parameters had changed, so we could not apply to get a loader for that.
Were they for smaller landfills or?
No, it's, they're giving away $3 million, but we did apply for a grant for a screener for our composting operations. That was in the parameters of what they were allowing for this year. So now I'm back to having to buy a loader, and I'm waiting on a couple of bids from Southwest Ag and Hanan Equipment on them. And hopefully I'll have that next week.
And I think I asked you this question before, but is that a lease? Are you gonna do a lease?
I'm gonna have both options to bring to you.
Okay, so you'll have a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year with the
They're looking at a
option?
municipal lease or just an outright buyout. But I'm still waiting on both quotes from both companies.
Okay.
Does Honan have anything similar to what we do with our blades out at the landfill on
They
that
do.
lease?
And
I'm
he's
gonna tell
working
you
on
that, I think we ought to take a real serious look at that. If they have that same kind of arrangement that we've got on those John Deere blades out at the road department, because that's a pretty sweet deal.
One of the things I was talking to him about was, this piece of equipment doesn't cost near what one of those blades cost.
Oh, no.
So that's something we really need to.
Understand that,
Yeah.
but still, they make the use of it, the buyout or renewing it with a new piece of equipment, and they buy, I mean, it's a.
He's putting that in, I'm just waiting on the bids.
Good, we'll take a good hard look at that.
Yeah.
I think that's about it. We got another inspector coming at the end of the month.
From who, may I
The
ask?
tire people.
The tire?
CDPHE, the tire.
CDPHE tire people.
Tell them you'll give them some free samples.
It was quite the talk at the SWANA conference.
Was there any talk at the SWANA conference about fuel to energy? Or waste to
Some, not a
energy, I'm
lot.
sorry?
Not a lot.
Because I think waste to energy is a great solution, especially with a product the CDPHE is banned from landfill, like tires, that burns really well. They could actually collectively from the state, if we could do 30,000 in our little county, I don't know how many tires are throughout the state. But if we put in a waste to energy where we could burn those tires and convert it to electricity to charge their electric vehicles, we'd really be onto something.
So why was it the talk? Because more counties are interested?
We're the only ones that did it.
Huh?
We're the only ones that have done it. Nobody had seen our project like this. And this is kind of, this is a pilot project for us. We don't know how this is all gonna pan out, the
Yeah.
shredder and everything.
Right.
But as we move forward with the landfill, with Shaq's plan that he had put in place a few years down the road, we're gonna be grinding construction demolition, which will require purchase of a shredder. Then we'll start grinding tires. We'll
Oh.
never ship them out again.
Right.
And
That's,
And we don't
That's
ship
my
any
goal.
of them to Colorado Springs?
we ship them to
Yeah.
Colorado Springs.
That's where we ship them.
Yeah.
But then we have to pay for the transportation?
Correct.
And that's on
That's why we
us?
charge for the tires.
mhm.
Okay.
So it breaks even.
So
So it
just,
breaks even.
it's just a break even?
Yeah. So that figure on the budget, I mean, it looks pretty good, but we're fixing to use some of that.
No,
so.
gotcha. But that is good.
Has
That,
got to be replaced.
those are good numbers, Mel.
It's,
I mean, we know you have to keep your equipment going, and that becomes,
Some of that's
Right.
going into closing costs.
yeah.
true. And
I love that.
bear in mind, we got that cell to build next year.
Right.
And that's gonna be a pretty intensive project,
Yeah.
a lot more than what the last one was, so.
Yeah, since they changed the rules of the game, huh?
Well, the rules and the design, I mean, we're starting, this is like
Right.
almost starting all over with a new leachate collection system, new pumps, everything else. It's all new, so. Other than that,
Thank you.
you
Yeah.
bet.
Good luck on
Thanks.
that loader. Yeah, let us know what they come back with on that.
I will,
lease
as
and
soon as
that
I get
purchase, yeah.
some figures, I'll
Yeah.
send them up to Shaq, maybe I'll come in get you put on the agenda or something, we can get it.
Gotcha.
Try to get it done for the end of the year.
Before the end of the year.
All right, thank you, Mel.
Perfect. Thank you, Mel.
Planning Department. Came in just at the right time.
Professionals, you
Do you have anything in Dropbox for this? Or not really?
know? No, we're
It's
just,
just all signatures, isn't it?
just signatures,
Okay,
right-handed pen.
we're all blue up here. Blue. I have to use that one?
No,
Oh, okay, good. All
I
right.
just brought mine
I
just
think
in
your
case.
blue works.
Well, she has a special one for
I
those
know.
final plats, buddy.
That's a left-handed
So I
thing.
need to go through these. We have a high impact permit, number 712, for property owned by John R. Hayes located at 2551 Hawkins Street, Cortez. And I believe this is for a tower and
Yes.
Correct.
the communications tower.
That's
It's
correct.
already been approved and
Yes.
said and
Yes.
done. Okay. It's for you too, my friend. You don't have a blue pen, Commissioner?
Here you go.
Uh-oh, he's sharing a right-handed pen.
I'll give
may
you
not
mine
work
next
for
one.
you.
I'll give you mine on the
Well,
next one,
should I
there,
give
Don.
you Nickname it Big D.
And we don't
Thanks to
mean,
Caleb Clark.
and we don't mean divorce or Dallas on that. do we? Big D. Okay, the
Yeah,
next
that
one
pen
is
crossed the line, didn't it?
high impact number 675, special use permit number 7-2019, Ironwood Group, Agent Jeff Bunnell, on property owned by Horst Norbert Bukowski
Mm-hmm.
on 27930 County Road T, Ironwood Group. Okay. Did you get the blue pen?
Yeah,
And our third and final one is a high impact permit number 689, amendment to high impact number 689 of Countryside Disposal, owner Herman and Kim Rosas at
Correct.
25582 Road H, Cortez. Okay, I think that takes care of the planning department.
That's all we've got.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
That's
guys.
all you have?
That's all we got.
He'll go find, don't ask me, he'll
Wow.
go find something else.
We're working on new stuff.
That's good.
Next on our
Okay.
agenda, we have an old business stipulation. Apparently-
And I don't have anything listed under there unless you guys want to bring something up. I think
Oh,
we
okay.
covered a lot of stuff yesterday. And may cover more of that.
I'm good for now.
I don't think I have
I think we're in the
anything right
midst
now.
of all that, I am too, yeah. Okay. No old business.
I'm gonna go grab yours.
Attorney Baxter, do you have a report for us today?
You know, the only thing I wanted to bring up was that FCC petition to get
Oh,
Denver
TV.
TV here. So we've been researching what to do. What La Plata did is they didn't really satisfy everything the FCC wanted, but it went through. To really do it by the book, to hit all the points that FCC wants in the petition, I think it's gonna cost some money of gathering the information. There's a lot of surveys and data we need to acquire, and I think it'll cost a lot of money, well, maybe 20 grand or so. But La Plata counties went through, so I don't see why we can't do basically the exact same things La Plata County. Are not, some of the things that we could probably do, if you all want to, is get volunteers to collect signatures for the petition. You're supposed to have a certain amount of signatures. And so, you know, rather than hiring a company to do that, perhaps the people that are interested, we can reach out to and say, hey, collect the signatures if you want those. Another reason I'm hesitant to tell you all, hey, the county should spend money on this, is La Plata County has different transmitters, I guess. I don't understand the science behind it, but they can't just put up rabbit ear antennas and get Denver TV like Montezuma County can.
Yeah.
Can you get closer to your microphone?
Turn it on.
And so all you have to do here in Montezuma County is get rabbit ears and for a few bucks, and you can watch Denver TV.
Exactly. Through our translators here, we get
Right.
3 stations, 4 stations, yeah.
But we can still continue to go through this, file it, try to get it approved like La Plata did, but also understand La Plata County, even though they did this petition years ago and they finally got it approved, they don't have Denver TV, and my understanding is that's because Denver TV wants money from La Plata County for advertising, and La Plata County isn't willing to fork it up. And so they don't even have that. And so if we went through that whole process, then we'd have to be negotiating with those channels too, financially, to try to get them to come down here. So it just didn't look that easy and optimistic and like such a great idea to me. It's certainly something we can pursue anyway and try to put us in the same position as La Plata. But like I said, they've got a different situation. They can't
get that.
And, and what if we jeopardize that by doing this? I mean, I don't know if we would.
I don't know either.
But
that's.
I think one of the only complaints that I heard from one of the people that came to speak to us about that was, granted, those stations don't come in high definition. So
Right.
I guess depending upon your palette for what you have to have, high definition is obviously important to somebody. But with a 695 antenna, you can get 4 Denver channels anywhere here in the Cortez area. So I'm of the ilk that if it's that important to you to get Denver television down here and that's something you need, Walmart, all those places sell a little antenna, and it's no big deal to hook one up, and you can have 4 stations of Denver TV here tomorrow.
And really, anybody can file this petition too.
Yeah.
It was the former county administrator of La Plata that spearheaded this thing and did it.
I believe that the technology and the way that we receive our information is changing so rapidly anyway that it would be relevant to hear.
Yeah, before long.
I mean,
yeah.
I use an antenna and I love the price. Free. I don't
Absolutely
understand
free.
these people,
Yeah.
$200
Well,
for.
and with that antenna, you get Utah, you get New Mexico, you get Denver,
Grand
you
Junction.
get Grand Junction,
Salt Lake.
So you open up the whole. I mean, to me, I wouldn't spend a nickel.
I wouldn't either.
I wouldn't spend a nickel going after this thing.
Well, I have a different point of view. If
Go.
you spend all that money that you don't have to get stuff you don't need, you can impress people you don't like.
Where did we find this guy? I swear.
Where did this guy come from?
Wait till he gives his presentation. You guys shouldn't leave and listen to what he's got to say.
Enough said, I think.
I think we have it right now, and it's been there for several years. It isn't HD, but there again,
Very watchable, and you can get all the news
Yeah.
and everything you want. Right
The older you get, it doesn't matter anyway. Your HD went away naturally.
True. I guess that's true.
Okay.
Well, that's it.
Is that all you have, John?
Yes.
Okay. All right. James Dietrich. Good morning, James.
Morning, gentlemen.
How are you today?
Ladies, of course.
Good.
Is that our brother?
Gentlemen, what I'm bringing forward is kind of a standard template that comes from GOCO. What it amounts to is a resolution in support of the McPhee Breakwater project.
Great.
Oh, okay.
So,
Great.
pretty standard. It's almost the exact same language we've seen with every other one of these resolutions we've done with GOCO.
Okay.
So anyway, I'm just asking for support for
us
the
to
resolution
pass that
today.
resolution and sign it that we're in favor of it, yeah.
So I would move that the Board of County Commissioners of Montezuma County, State of Colorado, sign the resolution, don't have the number right now, 2019, in support
Maybe read the
of,
title.
it's a resolution in support of Montezuma County's grant request to Great Outdoors Colorado Local Parks and Outdoor Recreation Grant Program for the completion of the McPhee Breakwater Project.
Second.
It's Been moved and seconded for the Board of Montezuma County Commissioners to pass a resolution number to be determined in support of Montezuma County's grant request to Great Outdoors Colorado Local Parks and Outdoor Recreation Grants Program for the completion of the McPhee Breakwater Project. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Okay, well, that should put us in a position to submit our grant by Thursday. We've got the whole thing really finished. I'll package it up and get it submitted.
Make sure you put the resolution number on there for us.
Yeah.
Yes, sure will. Yeah, and I've
Whatever the next
visited with
sequence.
Shaq
I'll
about
get
that.
with you on that.
What's that?
What was the amount?
$350,000 from GOCO. So anyway, I guess we've got that covered. I will be, I'm continuing to assemble that package. I've got to go to the city council tonight for the city of Cortez to explain this project and ask for a letter of support. So that's pretty much the last big hoop to jump through for this. So we'll get her submitted. We will be planning to move forward with a MCRAC meeting this Thursday evening. And, of course, we're working on comments for the Sage Hen project as well as the Dolores, for the RICO West Dolores project, and then also the travel management plan for the BLM. And so those comments should be forthcoming next week. We've been getting, a smattering of comments that have been coming in from the MCRAC, and those have been forwarded to the county commissioners. Got one more this morning, which I haven't forwarded to you yet, but be watching for that. So. Aside from that, we've been kind of shifting gears a little bit, putting a little time into working on fairgrounds planning, and we'll continue to try to come up with a strategy to move forward with that. I'll just go ahead and help Larry, whatever Larry would like to move forward with, and we can set up public process, whatever we need to do to develop, plans. So I think we've got some emergency, I shouldn't say emergency, but we should figure out some priorities for this year, and then, I think pulling together kind of a comprehensive plan would be very, very helpful. So, I guess that kind of concludes it for this week. We're still in the holding pattern for the Paz de Mesa Verde Trail. Probably still will not hear anything until, November or something along those lines. It may even be slightly later than that.
But nothing negative coming back on that.
That's correct. Nothing negative at all. Yes.
Good.
So did we write a letter, I believe we did, in support of the motorcycle groups on the travel management plan for the Forest Service up around Rico?
I recall we did. I have to check my files, but I believe so.
And so the reason that one of the proponents, the people that are opponents against it was the San Juan Citizens Alliance. And so now it's come to my attention that it's called the Rico Trails Alliance, which is the mountain bike club. There's a road that it went to a mine, and it goes right there out of Rico, and it goes up to where you can hit salt. They call it the Salt Trail, and it was for older people. It was the only place actually they've been using it since the mountain bike's been created, and somebody had one up there. But now the San Juan Citizens Alliance is trying to stop all of those proposed trails for this Rico Trails Alliance because the road wasn't shown on a map or some kind of thing like that. But they said it's a road. Truck could have went down it. But I wonder if you could dig into if there's any way we could say anything, the same thing as we did for the motorized as well as the non-motorized, in support of their trail system. They're also wanting to where they have a trail going down the Galpin Goose from Rico to Scotch Creek. Yeah.
Using that old railroad bed for
Yes,
a trail.
instead of riding on the road with no shoulders.
Sure, that one makes sense. It's actually been talked about for a really long time.
So when is your MCRAC meeting?
That'll be Thursday evening at 6 p.m.
Could you bring that up as a topic to see
Certainly.
what the rest of the group thinks?
Absolutely,
Thank you.
certainly will. You bet. Gentlemen, unless there's anything else, I guess that concludes my report for the week here.
Thank you, James.
I do like your drawing. Looking at these samples that you gave to us are pretty creative.
Give us something
Give
to
us
think
something to
about.
look
Yeah.
at and
Yeah.
what to prioritize out there for the fairgrounds, so thank
Sure.
you.
And these are, they're just sketches, and I'm really trying to draw up, I'm getting information coming in from multiple areas. And so, I'm trying to reflect the ideas that I'm hearing, and at some point, we'll want to pull all those together to one comprehensive drawing that kind of reflects as much of that as we possibly can, and try to fit it together as best we all can. The drawings that you've got right now, if you would like to talk to me about it at any time, some further explanation might be helpful. Certainly didn't have time to label everything the way that would have liked to, but I can go over all this with everyone, and just wanted just kind of reinforce the idea that these are drafts. So,
Right.
Sure,
yeah.
sure. Good start, great
Okay.
start.
So,
Very good.
James, I don't know if you were listening during the water presentation, but they put a high emphasis on trying to get measurements and quantified data being saved when forests are properly managed and thinned and that. I know public lands are scheduled to be here in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Could you reach out ahead of time and ask Derek Padilla and Connie and whoever else is coming to that to pull any numbers that they have on that already?
Okay, I can
Thank
sure
you.
do that. You bet.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, James. Shaq Powers, our county administrator. And the guy that wants nothing from nobody, to go nowhere, to do nothing, to be impressed by everybody.
And you have 2 minutes.
Start your timer.
He's got something that's, besides the water, is extremely important.
So Commissioner Sukla had reached out to me over the weekend and asked if I had money for dealing with substance abuse and mental health. How would I spend it? And I'm not going to get to a dollar amount or anything today. I just want to, first I want to start by reiterating the problems in Montezuma County. These are just some of the news clippings from the last year. Montezuma County inmate suspected of selling meth in jail. There's also another one with a guy bringing needles into the jail, and that ended up in the purchasing of a scanner for the jail. State looks to expand opioid treatment centers, but not in Southwest Colorado, which is what we always hear. We've got one of the worst problems, but we're getting no help. Inmate with syringes headed to New Mexico to face prison sentence. Colorado, as drug use increases, so does syphilis. Recovered alcoholic encourages others to look beyond addiction. Where did the opioid epidemic hit Colorado? 16 million pain pills in Southwest Colorado. And this is just a small spattering. We all see the newspaper, and we know what's out there. In March, when we were discussing the red flag hearings, the coroner presented statistics, and we see that in overdose deaths, we're neck and neck with counties that have almost twice again our population. Suicide toxicology reports almost always come up for alcohol, THC, meth, going back as far as we can remember. So it is a major issue for our area, and I think some of the things that we need to do, first of all, is I think we need someone to work on the legislation at a state level. If we have an elderly person, there's no one in the room I could use as an example, but if they're if you had an elderly person in your life and they start making bad decisions, can't remember things, getting lost, and it becomes apparent that they're going into early onset dementia or Alzheimer's or something like that, you can petition the court and you can get what's called emergency durable power of attorney to make medical decisions on that person's behalf. However, if you have somebody that's making equally or worse decisions due to the abuse of a substance or a mental health disorder, and it's apparent to the family member, to the loved ones, to the friends, if you take that person to the hospital, to a mental health treatment facility, even if we had a rehab facility, you will be told that they cannot help that person unless, one, it's voluntary, or two, if they're an immediate threat to themselves or someone else. And that threat has to mean they have a plan and a means of carrying out the plan. And then, if you can show that, they'll only hold them for 3 to 5 days. Otherwise, it has to be voluntary. Well, my question is, how do you expect a person whose decision-making organ is not working to make the right decision? And the way my understanding of the law right now is that constitutionally, they have the right to reject medical treatment. And it's been told to me like this, that if you have cancer and you don't want to go through the treatment, that you have the right to reject that service. You don't have to accept treatment. I would agree with that in almost every scenario, unless the cancer was a brain cancer that's affecting your decision-making organ, your ability to make a decision. People who are strung out and addicted to drugs have lost the ability to make the correct decisions. Their need to fulfill the urge to get high is in control. They don't have the ability to make the right decision. So I think at a legislative level, what we need is for the commissioners to work to get that barrier removed, because the people who in this community who have loved ones struggling with a substance addiction or a mental health problem, they don't want them out there using cups out of the garbage can to try and get rainwater out of the gutter to drink. And if that person was in their right mind, they wouldn't want to be in that situation either. And I think one of the critical roles of government is to get all the hoops out of the way so we can treat people or grow industry or whatever. I think that there is a roadblock that I would like to see the commissioners pursue in getting legislation passed at a state level that would allow a person to get emergency durable medical power of attorney for a loved one that's suffering from substance abuse or a mental health disorder. That's number one. Number two, if you talk to a mental health provider, if you talk to the hospitals, and you say, I have a loved one that's suffering from a mental health issue, I have a loved one suffering from a substance abuse problem, what can I do to help them? What are the specific things that I need to do? The standard responses are, it's up to them. You got to wait for them to make the right decision. If you're waiting for a person whose decision-making organ is right to make the right decision, you're playing Russian roulette. It's just a matter of time. And you always get the same standard answers. It's about the decisions that they make. You can't be told specifics. And the reason is, in my opinion, because the research hasn't been done. Just like Don Schwent was saying, we need the numbers to validate how forest management is conserving water. There was a time when search and rescue efforts was just people going out and randomly walking around. There was a gentleman, Robert Kuster, he wrote this book called Lost Person Behavior, and what you're seeing on the screen is screenshots that I took from the app on my phone. And what he did is he took 15,000 case studies of people who had been lost, and he organized them into this book. So that if I blew this up on the screen, so it would be as if you're scrolling through my phone, but you can go through by different profiles and look where somebody is. Is it somebody that's on water? Have they been abducted? Is there an aircraft? Wheel or motorized vehicle, mental state, what happens to people with autism, child. And I'm going to go with what we would normally see around here, outdoor activity. And for the sake of our example, I picked a hiker. Okay? Because of all the case studies he's taken, you do know what to do. You got a tactical briefing that comes in there, things that you ought to do. You have your investigation tasks. You have orders of how to contain and travel corridors, And let me just skip down to how he puts all this together. We can see, because he took the case studies and broke them apart, that in a mountainous area and a dry area, and there's other options that you could choose there, which is what our area is, mountain dry, 75% of hikers that were found were within 4 miles of their last known location. So with search and rescue, when we show up on a scene, what we do is we're at their vehicle or wherever they were last known. For a hiker, in this case, we'll draw a 4-mile circle on a map around, and that gives us an area where we should look. Now, the area of a circle is pi r squared, so 4 squared is 16 times roughly 3 is 48 square miles that we need to be looking in. And then he further breaks it down. 52% of hikers are going to go downhill when they get lost. 48% will go uphill. So when we come to decision points, we will search downhill first. We know from the records that most people, 95% of them, will stay moving for 26 hours, but they may be going back and forth. We can tell from the case studies their dispersion angle from where their original goal was, how far degrees offset they were from where their original goal was. We also have information that says, you know, when hikers go astray, where are they found? Well, 31% of them are in the majority of them are in a linear, which could be like a contour, something that resembles a trail, a game trail, whatever. 18% are found in drainages, 17% roads, and then so on and so forth. So we can eliminate areas where they're likely not going to be based upon what they're doing. And then we have the scenarios that account for why they were missing. The vast majority of them got lost, a little bit of them overdue, and then 7% something happened to them. In the very least one, investigative, they're trying not to be found.
Now tell me your idea.
So anyways, you get through all of this. None of this research has been done for people that are abusing substances, for people with mental health. What I think I would like to do is partner with certain stakeholders in our area, pull together the case studies that we have, because the hospital has them, Axis has them, the police department has them, the district attorney has them. Get the research done so that we can say, you know, in this percent of cases with this person addicted to this substance, they made these decisions and these were the outcomes. So that we can begin with an evidence-based practice and start determining what some best practices are. And I don't think it'll cost that much money to hire a research fellow, especially if you get partnering agencies such as Southwest Memorial, Access Mental Health, and something like that. I think people that need to be included in trying to determine what statistics we need to put together would be someone from social services, someone from the public health department, someone from the sheriff's department, the district attorney, Axis, the recovery center, the fire district and EMS, Southwest Memorial, and I'd like to include recovered addicts because they don't think the same way we do. Addicts don't. So that would be my ask of the commissioners, is one, that we begin working on legislation at a state level to clear the doors for family members of loved ones suffering, to get the roadblocks out of the way for getting them the treatment they need, and two, that we begin to do some research so that we can have an evidence-based method for treating people instead of guessing.
And I think your idea is genius. I think that every other industry, we have some kind of way to gauge. You know, like you said to me yesterday, yeah, if they've been on marijuana for a month or a year or whatever, this is when will they go to cocaine, or what is the next drug they go to? And what I think that having a roadmap like you have for your search and rescue for opioid addiction, which is an epidemic in our country, I think there actually could be millions of dollars it would be a person that could be poured to this idea would gain momentum. It'd be unbelievable, in my opinion. It's a great idea.
So are you recommending Coram reach out to him first?
I don't know who to recommend to reach out to first. You guys have the pull, but yeah, I think something needs to change legislatively at the state, so Coram and Catlin would be a good place to start. But I think before that, we need to draft what the legislation would work with. I don't know where we could find an attorney to work with on this, but.
So the counties do that all the time, and we propose a piece of what he's proposing, and then we try to get a House sponsor and a Senate sponsor, and then that legislation would be an idea that was thought of, that came right from here, Mr. Power, and then we would support it.
I think that Catlin or Coram is working on some sort of legislation right now, and it has been for the last couple of years. I don't know if it's specifically designed around what you're talking, but there is legislation that's going on right now in the state of Colorado.
I don't think it is. I think Shack's still's one of a kind, in my opinion. I think that the legislation is going to be the same thing we see with the water. You know, how do we fight this and how do we fight that? Shack's got a solution. That's what's so important about it. He's got a solution.
I think before any of what your roadmap, before that transpires, it's like in those autopsy reports on the people that have died with certain levels of drugs in their system. You're going to have to find an avenue or a way to get that person tested, a blood draw or something, to know exactly what that person is addicted to.
And I think there's enough case studies from the hospital and from Axis that we could pull that. We need a research fellow to quantify that.
Right.
To put it in columns and say this,
but
this, and this.
I understand that part of, but before you're talking about an intervention, you're talking about getting power of attorney and some type of intervention on somebody that's out here in our public that's exhibiting these behaviors and these things, that I think what this is going to have coupled with that is the ability to say, okay, this person is absolutely out of control in their life and they're doing all these weird things and they're becoming a behavioral. How do you require them to get a blood draw tested to say, okay.
So the judge has evidence to make decision with, instead of just coming to
THC.
the commissioner saying, I hear noise from my road, you need a decibel reading.
Right.
And that's something we'll have to look at.
But I think that's your first step, is to identify what that person, what they're on, what they have in their system that then validates your concerns about their behavior, their mental attitudes, their conditions, and all of that. So that I think is your very, very
The other thing I'm concerned with is you actually, you're trying to take away their right.
Well,
They have the right to do whatever they want to with their body, and I'm not saying that
No, you're
that's a smart thing to do. I would say it's absolutely not, but I mean.
But I think that the key.
When we would run on people, if they denied treatment, you didn't treat them. They have that right to deny treatment. So what you're saying is you want to take away that right.
What I'm saying is, in this case, they do not have the ability to make the right decision for themselves because the ability-making organ is sick.
And the part that I grip on
So
is
when a person is unable to make a decision for themselves, you give aid anyway, and it's the Good Samaritan law that covers you to do it.
Correct, and I can make an informed decision based on what I see.
On your
If the person.
So when you see these people that are strung out on drugs, your informed decision tells you that if they were in their right mind, they would not want to live the way that they're living.
If they were in their right mind, they would have never made that decision. You're correct. But they do every day. I'm not arguing the point that we don't have a problem and that we should look at a solution. I'm saying what you're saying is that we're going to take away somebody's right, and I don't think that's ever going to happen.
I think the difficulty in drafting legislation for that is that they're going to have be committing a crime or doing something else.
Well, it already is that.
In addition to if you are just sitting in your house drinking and getting drunk off your whatever, and, because then the court probably is not gonna be willing to, intervene. I think you're gonna need probably a threat to somebody else.
But I still, the point for me is not that. It's the predictability of the next step that person's going to take. Nobody's done that. Nobody. But if we knew that Larry Don's daughter is been on whatever, and the research shows that in 1 month, she's more than likely to do this, this, and this. That is what's so important about what he's talking about, because nobody's done that. Nobody. Is that not important? If you have an idea, my kid's in about a month fixing to go all the way. Wouldn't that be great to have that information so that you could maybe prevent it?
So your kids are gonna be different than an independent adult.
Correct.
Right, but I'm saying, I mean, I was told fentanyl or whatever is 1,000 times feels better than a freaking orgasm. Well, if there is a freaking chemical out there that feels 1,000 times better than an orgasm, we're all in trouble. I'm sorry, but that is a true story.
But there,
You can't stop it.
I'm not saying that, Larry Don. What I'm saying is that you cannot, a person has a right, and that's what I'm saying with legislation, a person has a right to make a decision for themselves, whatever they consume. I'm not saying it's a good idea.
What I'm saying is, just like a person with dementia, they're incapable of making the decision.
I understand that.
Yes.
I understand that.
But then that becomes a subjective judgmental call.
But they do it every day. If somebody has a senior citizen in their life that's starting down that road to Alzheimer's, it happens every day where people intervene and get an emergency medical durable power of attorney. Not to take their right away, but to help them.
Well, and you can do that up to the age of 18 years old with any one that's not responsible for their own behaviors.
Correct. But what do you do for someone between 19 and 68? There's a large spectrum of people there.
Therein lies the nut.
That's the problem.
Is that they have, I mean, what you're saying is, I don't argue with it. I think it'd be fantastic to have all that information. How you're going to gather it becomes a monumental.
And then what are you going to do with it when you have it? What do you do with it then?
Well, he's got an app that he can find somebody that's lost.
You start using evidence. You start using evidence-based knowledge and research for treatment.
And I get it, Shaq. I am with you, man, 100%. I like your train you're on. Keep driving it. But I'm just telling you, there's not. Those people still have a right. Just because you want to take it away because you think that they are not.
Well, here's what the government comes up for, right? They see these red flags that, oh no, this person's strung out on drug, and oh no, this person's acting like they're not sane. So instead of the court ordering them into a rehab or a mental treatment facility to get help, they say go confiscate their guns. And that's a violation of a constitutional right that's guaranteed in the Second Amendment.
So you're doing the same thing.
And you're doing the same thing.
I'm not taking away their guns. I'm trying to get them help. Who
You're taking
gets
away their right. It's a right. What they put in their body is their right.
Yeah, but they have lost the ability to discern what they're putting in their body.
Who gives you, what makes you the judge and jury over that? That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying.
What makes you the judge and jury of when a person can use their Jake brake? When there's evidence based that it's violating the decibel readings at a property line as set forth in the land use code.
That's correct.
So when the evidence base is there, and we know that a person is going to destroy themselves or somebody else based upon research, it is then the government's job to defend the people that they are going to destroy.
Are we doing it with diabetes? I mean, if we're going to do this, it's so huge. How do you tell everybody out there to stop eating today because you're 50 pounds overweight and you're 200 pounds overweight and you're killing yourself and I'm going to take your right away because I know that the next step is diabetes and you're going to implode.
Well, my answer to that would be...
It's the same thing, Shaq.
But the
it's not.
pancreas is not the decision-making organ. My point is that they are not able to make a good decision.
It is
They
not a
have
good decision.
the ability to make a good decision to start eating vegetables. Somebody who's strung out on drug, the chemical is in control of their decisions.
I understand that, but they were in control to put the chemical in their body.
I just want to
the
find
problem.
out if in a month my daughter's going to do something I could save her life. And so what
And
he's talking is well worthwhile, and take it all the way about taking their rights. Why don't we just work on doing what his app does, so that when a parent has something going on funky, like Mrs. Ramsey, where she broke into Chapel's house, and one of the best clean-cut kids in high school, and there's a way for the parent or the mother or the friend, like, that statistics say 75%, they're going to go do this next. What is wrong with that? Nothing.
I don't disagree with
Well, then
that.
that's where let's start. That's
How do you
Well,
control
let's start with the
parenting?
research.
Huh?
How do you control parenting?
How do you control?
How do you control parenting? There's responsibility
You
on
want
the
me to control
parent
my
to be
parents?
able,
I don't understand what you're saying.
parenting.
I don't want to
It is-
control
it is
anything. I
your
want the knowledge to
responsibility.
prevent.
Anyway.
I want the knowledge to
Well, we
stop
can start
something.
the research piece without the legislative piece.
It ain't helping what they're doing right now. And they're killing themselves every day. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, rich, poor. They're
I
killing
agree.
themselves every day because of how good it feels. So
I
why don't we
agree.
try something? When we hit a roadblock, we'll try something else. Because nobody else is doing it. I think what Shaq's got is a solution. Maybe it goes in a whole different direction, but man, I'm for people that try to make something better, and instead of just always whine and can't do that, and can't do that, never been tried before. It's just not the way.
And the research could show something that you don't expect.
That's correct.
We may be assuming a bunch of stuff that isn't what research shows.
So what I would like permission from the board is to reach out to social services, public health, the sheriff's office, the district attorney's office, Access, the recovery center, the fire district, EMS, Southwest Memorial, and some recovered addicts, to see what parameters we can research and to look into the possibility of getting an intern or a research fellow to begin compiling statistics from case studies that already exist.
Sure. And I think you should contact what few of them are left, any of your rehab institutions.
I think those places are good contacts that might
Sure.
might know how to the recovery
And
center and.
I think your rehab facilities are gonna have a lot of statistics on inpatient treatment, what they see, where they go, how they go. That could help you too.
And we can worry about the legislative piece later.
Yeah.
Because that might be trickier.
It will be definitely
I think you're gonna
trickier than
have
compiling
10 years
research.
of data before you ever get to a legislative. Just like Ken said this morning, just on cloud seeding. There, and
But how many
I-
years of data is sitting over there that hasn't been compiled into anything useful?
I think it probably has been compiled. It's just a matter of whether we know about it or not. So
Well, let's start looking.
Yeah, it's this story about planting a tree.
Okay. Gather some up and see what kind of conclusions you come up with. See if there's anything that leads you.
Asking you for some help.
He's asking for
I'm
permission.
behind him
I
all
think
He's asking
is
for
all-
permission.
Is all we heard. Right.
Correct. Give me permission to reach out to them. When we decide we need to hire somebody, what parameters to look for, then I'll ask for help.
All right.
Did I go over my 2 minutes?
Yeah, you did, but.
But you
way
got
over
your
your 2
permission.
minutes.
He's
Way
very
up
passionate
wheels.
about the subject.
It's
It is
it's
well
a very important subject, so it's noble and admirable that he's passionate about it because
And I
it affects
agree.
all of us.
It affects all of us, every one of us. I absolutely agree. I'm just saying that I'm over my 2 minutes.
Commissioner report.
Commissioner Sutcliffe, Commissioner Candelaria.
I have no report. I had a great I had a great birthday and a great vacation, and
Yeah. I had one meeting last week. I got to preview Mr. Millard's presentation today, along with Don Schwint and Ken Curtis, and we did it here in the BOCC. And I think Ed was appreciative that he got some help and some guidance on some different things, and I think he's absolutely right. The more he does this and gives this presentation, the better he's going to be, kind of like Andy Mueller that he said was so dynamic and so concise with his presentations that on the demand management, that he was able to sell a lot of people on demand management, were right, wrong, or indifferent. He was able to promote that. So I'm hoping Ed's going to get to that, get to that same stage where people will recognize some of the information he's got in that presentation. And I had a great trip to Dallas. Yeah. So.
Business or pleasure?
Pleasure.
Oh.
Well, semi-business, my wife's business, and I went with her, so.
Were you there for the tornado?
No, I got back on Friday. Yeah. That's all I have.
Move to adjourn.
Public
Oh,
comment.
Public comment.
Come, up. Please.
Lisa Henry.
18220, Road 26. You might, on your list of people to consult, like the Bridge and nonprofits like Renew, who shelter people, maybe even, well, Four Corners would be children, but you might want to include that on people to talk about, because we see them, they get kicked out of shelter if they're using.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, we'll close public comment.
Move to adjourn.
second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn our meeting today. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.